Chapter 833. Guhan took off his game helmet and heard cheers coming from the training field. They shouted in unison, "Miss Ling! Miss Ling!" Obviously, they were cheering for Yangjing City to win this crucial victory. Guhan also accepted the fact that he was in second place very calmly. Who asked him to be so pretentious in the first 2 hours and let Juzi and Chijian kill Yuan Ku by themselves? If he had done it himself in these 2 hours, then his score would have exceeded 150,000 points. Of course, this score was a little too terrifying. Guhan did not want to get so many points and cause some unnecessary trouble. Now this score was just right. In fact, the gap between Guhan and Liuyan Ling was not much, and it was enough for Guhan to enter the final round of the competition. When he successfully defeated all the opponents in the final round of the competition and won the championship of the Elite 8 Academies tournament, then Guhan could also fulfill his promise. This was enough. At this time, the other remaining contestants also took off their helmets one after another. Guhan glanced at the throne, but was surprised to find that only Liuyan Ling was still lying on her seat with her helmet on. She did not look like she was going to wake up at all. Could it be? Guhan immediately walked quickly to Liuyan Ling's side, pressed the forced exit button on the helmet, and forced Liuyan Ling out of the game. Then he took off the helmet and touched her forehead. Sure enough, Liuyan Ling's forehead was shockingly hot. What is that despicable man doing? Is he not reconciled to his failure in the game and wants to take revenge on Miss Ling in reality? A spectator noticed Guhan's strange behavior and immediately said to the people around him. Soon, the others also noticed Guhan's actions. They began to clamor and shout at the martial arts arena, asking Guhan to leave their goddess, Miss Ling. Soon, the staff of the organizing committee also noticed this. They first sent 2 people to Guhan and Liuyan Ling to inquire about the situation. After exchanging a few more words with Guhan, the 2 staff members hurriedly said something into their personal terminals. Soon after, a doctor in a white coat rushed over with a medical pod and placed Liuyan Ling in the medical pod for emergency treatment. What's going on? What happened to Miss Ling? Only then did the audience realize that the situation was different from what they had imagined. Could it be that Miss Ling was injured? But that was impossible. Although the battle just now was very intense, it was only a battle in the game. Even if she died hundreds or thousands of times in the game, it would not affect her in reality. How could Miss Ling be injured so badly that she had to enter the medical pod to recuperate? Miss Ling's mental state has suffered great damage. The doctor in the white coat frowned as he looked at the data that kept flashing on the medical pod. He asked Guhan, what exactly happened in the game? Why did Miss Ling's mental state suffer such great damage? Guhan instinctively recalled the situation at the last minute when his body suddenly lost its strength and was unable to move. When he thought about the 3-foot sword, the answer was simple and clear. It should be the human sword Maiden. Ling used the power of the human sword Maiden at the last minute to absorb strength from us contestants. So that's how it is. The doctor nodded. Perhaps that's the reason. However, our medical center's database has never recorded the use of the human sword Maiden's power in the game. So, it remains to be seen if that's the reason. Then Dr. Comrade, is there anything wrong with Linlin? Ji Yuhan asked again. She'll recover after some rest. As for the damage to her lifespan caused by the human sword Maiden, I don't know. After all, this is just a game. It shouldn't cause any damage to her lifespan, right? The doctor's words were filled with uncertainty. After all, this was a topic that no one had ever studied before. The doctor did not dare to make any careless conclusions. After answering Guhan's question, the doctor reported Liuyan Ling's condition to the organizing committee of the 8 hospitals conference, which was seriously concerned about this matter. If it was another contestant who was injured, the organizing committee could not be bothered with such matters. However, it was a member of the Liuyan family who was injured this time. It was different. If it was not handled properly, it would cause a huge problem. The 4th round of the competition has ended. The first team is the Liuyan Ling and Passerby B. They have a total of 96,000 points. Liuyan Ling has 88,000 points, and Passerby B has 8,000 points. The second team is the Guhan team. They have a total of 88,200 points. Guhan has 88,200 points. The third team is the Andreevich team. They have a total of 76,200 points. Andreevich has 48,000 points, and Ladia has 28,200 points. The fourth team is the Harry Chang Ruo team. They have a total of 50,300 points. Harry Chang Ruo has 27,300 points, and Leslie Dracula has 23,000 points. The last four teams are the Passerby B, Leslie Dracula, Harry Chang Ruo, and Ladia. Eliminated. Guhan, Liuyan Ling, and Andreevich have advanced to the finals. After the host announced the individual scores, Guhan realized that he was still in first place. He was 200 points ahead of Liuyan Ling. Yes, he was only 200 points ahead. However, 200 points was still a score. So, in terms of individual scores, Guhan was still in first place. However, this time, the total score of the school was not based on individual scores, but on the total score of the team. As a result, Yuzhong University, which was represented by Guhan, was still in first place with a total score of 181 points. Then, Yangjing University was in second place with 179 points. Finally, Moscow University was in third place with 151 points. Apart from them, the other schools had all been eliminated. As for the rankings, there was nothing to pay attention to. I believe that the readers are not interested in knowing the names of these people. Dear audience, today's competition has ended. The finals will begin at 8 a.m. tomorrow. Now, please leave the arena in an orderly manner. The remaining 3 contestants, please do not leave your thrones. Before the end of the competition, you are not allowed to leave your thrones. I repeat, dear audience. The broadcast in the martial arts arena kept repeating this message. It was close to 6 o'clock in the afternoon. The audience, who were tired after watching the competition for a day, began to prepare their positions. Just when everything was going on in an orderly manner and 2/3 of the audience had left the arena, the audience began to prepare their positions. The broadcast in the martial arts practice field was suddenly interrupted by a hurried voice. I am the Sword Spirit of the Hung Palace from the Shanhaiguan Dispatch headquarters of the Sword Committee. I am here to announce that the Octagon tournament has ended. All famous sword holders who participated in the Octagon tournament are not allowed to leave Yangjing City. You must report to the Sword Committee before 8 p.m. I repeat, the Octagon tournament has ended. All famous sword holders who participated in the Octagon tournament are not allowed to leave Yangjing City. You must report to the Sword Committee before 8 p.m. After the Sword Spirit of the Hung Palace repeated this message twice, he directly ended the broadcast. The audience was baffled, and the contestants were even more baffled. What's going on? Didn't they just say that the finals will be held tomorrow? Why did it suddenly end? A spectator asked his friend next to him. Why are you asking me? I'm also confused right now. I don't care when it ends. I just want to know who will come in first if it ends now, another spectator said. What's there to ask? If it ends now, the first place will naturally be that Yuzhong guy. After all, they have the highest total points, another spectator said with a sneer. This isn't right. How can this be? How can the tournament end just like this? There must be something shady going on. That Yuzhong guy must have bribed the damn Sword Committee. We are going to complain. We are going to complain. Regardless of how the audience was making a ruckus, Guhan, who was sitting on his throne, was thinking silently. As a matter of fact, he had roughly guessed what was going on when he heard the Sword Spirit of the Hung Palace. The Sword Spirit of the Gui Palace suddenly rushed out and forcefully announced the end of the 8 Academies tournament. In addition, all the sword bearers had to report to the Sword Committee headquarters before 8 o'clock in the evening. This meant that something huge had happened in Shanhai Pass. The sword bearers who were supposed to go to Shanhai Pass next month had to act immediately. They might even have to go to Shanhai Pass the next day. No. I don't have time to waste here. Guhan immediately stood up from his seat and went to a staff standing beside the throne. Hello, comrade. Can I leave the throne now? You can't. Before the finals begin, None of you are allowed to leave your thrones. The staff member immediately replied instinctively. Didn't you hear what the sword spirit of the Hung Palace said? He said the tournament is over. Since the tournament is over, why can't I leave? Guhan questioned again. This. The staff stuttered for a long time and didn't know how to answer Guhan. Hence, Guhan didn't want to waste any more time on the staff. He jumped off the throne and dashed out of the arena. It was 6 p.m., and there were still 2 hours before the final assembly time of 8 p.m. Guhan had to do something within these 2 hours. Originally, Guhan planned to spend a day or two to settle these things after the Octagon tournament. But now, there were only 2 hours left of the solid cold. Hello. Is it Jiyu Xuanwu? Guhan called Jiyu Xuanwu first. Jiyu Xuanwu's impatient voice came from the other end. What's wrong? Don't you have to finish the tournament tomorrow? How many more days do you need to accompany me to Shanghai Pass to meet my mother? No, I might have to leave for Shanghai Pass tomorrow. No, I might have to leave tonight. Go to the hotel immediately and wait for me. Guhan hung up the call. Chapter 834. What's the matter? I'm having a good time in the game. When she saw Guhan, Jiyu Xuanwu was obviously a little unhappy, which meant that she was having a good time in the game. You can enter the game? Guhan was taken aback. This Jiyu Xuanwu could actually enter the game. Could it be that she was really no different from a human in her human form? Exactly the same? Of course. Jiyu Xuanwu said proudly. I even synchronized Bai Tai's sword. I've promised Bai Tai that we'll be good friends in real life. You synchronized with Sword Lady in the game? Guhan was so surprised that he was speechless. A Yuan Ku could actually synchronize with Sword Lady. Guhan felt that his common sense had exploded. Was this Jiyu Xuanwu really his daughter? Come on, these things have nothing to do with you. Tell me, why did you call me over in such a hurry? Jiyu Xuanwu said in disdain. Didn't you tell me the day we met that your mother is living in Shanghai Pass? Guhan said a shocking fact. Jiyu Xuanwu's mother actually lived in Shanghai Pass. She lived in the most tragic battlefield in human history. Every inch of land was a place where fierce battles took place. It's not Shanghai Pass, it's a dimensional gap in Shanghai Pass. Jiyu Xuanwu corrected. Regardless of whether it's a dimensional gap or not, one thing is clear. If you want me to see your mother, I have to make a trip to Shanghai Pass, right? Guhan said. Yes. Jiyu Xuanwu did not refute this time. But didn't you say that you still have a lot of things to do and will need some time before you can go back with me? No, things have changed now. I might leave for Shanghai Pass as soon as tonight. But this time, I might set off with the human army, so you can't appear in front of them. You have to enter my dimensional pocket with Yuan Ku's form. Only then can I bring you into Shanghai Pass. Do you understand? Dimensional pocket. What's that? Jiyu Xuanwu tilted his head and asked. You don't need to know what it is. All you need to know is to stay inside and I will bring you into Shanghai Pass. Otherwise, you'll have to find a way to enter the Shanghai Pass and meet me there, Guhan said coldly. Come on, I have the ability to come out, but I don't have the ability to go back in. You humans have surrounded the Shanghai Pass like an iron wall, and there's also the Jutian Star battle formation on top. Other than following you, what else can I do? Jiyu Xuanwu said helplessly. According to what she told Guhan, she didn't leave Shanghai Pass through a normal passageway. Instead, she left Shanghai Pass through a dimensional tunnel in the dimensional gap. Otherwise, how could Jiyu Xuanwu, a half-baked Netherrealm Yuan Ku, break through the Jutian Star battle formation that not even 12 Zuwu could break and leave the Shanghai Pass? Unfortunately, this dimensional tunnel was a one-way tunnel. After Jiyu Xuanwu came out, she couldn't enter again. Therefore, she could only rely on Guhan and enter Shanghai Pass through Guhan. However, it was impossible for Guhan to bring a strange person like Jiyu Xuanwu into Shanghai Pass. Jiyu Xuanwu wasn't even a sword-bearer, so how could the Shanghai Pass Management Committee agree to let her enter Shanghai Pass? Therefore, Guhan had to put Jiyu Xuanwu into his dimensional pocket, just like how he had put the 3 Egyptian deities into his dimensional pocket 2 months ago and brought them into Yuzhong City. Although Jiyu Xuanwu didn't want to enter Guhan's dimensional pocket, she could only agree with Guhan's suggestion since she had no other way to enter Shanhai Pass. However, Jiyu Xuanwu suggested that she could only enter Guhan's dimensional pocket at the last moment. Now, she wanted to enjoy her last bit of freedom. Up to you. I'm going to the Sword Committee meeting now. You can enjoy your freedom around the Sword Committee. You have to be on call. Guhan could only say that. Don't worry, don't worry. Speaking of which, why are you going to the Sword Committee meeting now? Didn't you say to gather at 8 o'clock? It's only 6:10 now. Isn't it a little too early? Jiyu Xuanwu asked curiously. I still have to go see Lu Shihua. There are some things I need to do. This has nothing to do with you. Guhan left after saying that. Are you kidding? What do you mean it has nothing to do with me? I'm your daughter. Also, who is Lu Shihua? No, for the sake of my mother, I must get to the bottom of this. Jiyu Xuanwu's little head turned and he muttered to himself. When Guhan received Lu Shihua's call, Lu Shihua was in a meeting at the Yangjing City Sword Committee. Therefore, Guhan asked Lu Shihua to meet at the Sword Committee. Lu Shihua didn't dare to neglect Guhan's request. The meeting was only halfway through before she left. She sat quietly in the hall of the Sword Committee and waited for Guhan's arrival. Lu Shihua didn't wait too long. In just a few minutes, Guhan appeared in front of her. It could be seen that Guhan was in a hurry all the way. There was sweat on his forehead. It was obvious that he ran all the way. There's still an hour and 40 minutes. There's no need to rush here in such a hurry, right? Lu Shihua asked inexplicably. What made Lu Shihua even more puzzled was the girl in the white silk uniform behind Guhan. She held Guhan's hand tightly. The expression on her face was full of intimacy. It was as if they had an extraordinary relationship. Teacher is really too much. He already has so many women at home, yet he still wants to find another one when he's in Yangjing City. But since teacher has found so many women, why doesn't he be more intimate with me? Lu Shihua lamented in his heart. Husband, who is this woman? Is she your new concubine? Jiyu Xuanwu blinked his eyes and then asked Guhan very coquettishly. Husband? Lu Shihua was completely dizzy. They hadn't seen each other for a few days, and Master was already married. Ignore her. Just treat what she said as nonsense and ignore her existence. Guhan pulled his hand out. Let's go to Sword Pavilion with me now. Sword Pavilion? Why are we going there? Lu Shihua looked confused. To find your sword lady. The reason why Guhan brought Lu Shihua to Yangjing City was to help Lu Shihua coordinate his sword lady. However, many things happened after they came to Yangjing City, causing this matter to be pushed back again and again. Now that the 8 Academies assembly was over, Guhan might have to go to Shanhai Pass, and this trip might take a few years. So, Guhan had to help Lu Shihua coordinate his sword lady in the last hour or so. But Master. Lu Shihua wanted to say something, but Guhan grabbed his wrist rudely. If you have anything to say, we can talk when we get to Sword Pavilion. We don't have time to waste. But Master, I'm still an ordinary person. If I want to synchronize with the sword lady, do I have to submit an application first, have my body checked, and take the exam before I can go to the Sword Pavilion to synchronize with her? Lu Shihua asked weakly. Guhan didn't say anything. He had to admit that Guhan really forgot that there was such a step to synchronize the sword lady for the first time. Moreover, this was in Yangjing City, and he couldn't use the privilege of Yuzhong City at all. It was quite embarrassing. Fill out the application first. Guhan could only pull Lu Shihua to the counter of the Swordbearer's Service Center. He asked for a form from the attendant and began to fill out the application for synchronization. However, after a while, Lu Shihua quietly pulled Guhan's sleeve and pointed to the occupation column on the form. He asked weakly, "What should I fill in here?" "Fill in whatever occupation it is." Of course, Guhan knew what Lu Shihua was asking him. Don't worry about those strange things. You are the real pavilion master now. Lu Shihua nodded and then solemnly filled in the occupation column with the words Sword Pavilion Master. Although Lu Shihua was very hesitant when filling out the form, it was a waste of time. The attendant glanced at the form roughly and probably only looked at Lu Shihua's name. He didn't pay attention to the occupation at all because it had no effect on the application to become a sword-bearer. In the end, this form would probably become a pile of useless information and be piled up in a dimensional warehouse somewhere. Perhaps no one would care about it even after thousands of years. Therefore, whether it was before or after the apocalypse, things like filling out forms were mostly useless and a waste of resources. However, one had to fill it up because if they didn't fill it up and something went wrong, they would be in big trouble. All right. Both of you, please go to the number 7 and number 8 physical examination centers for your physical examination. When the physical examination confirms that your sword element has reached 100 quarks, you can take the exam and enter the sword pavilion for synchronization. After hearing the attendant's words, Guhan seemed to have returned to the memories of him and Song Hammer coming to the Swordbearers Service Center and meeting Song Afei, Liuyan Ling, and finally Qing Pin. This was a very important day for Guhan because he had met the most important women in his life on this day. However, Guhan and Song Hammer had gotten it together that day, so he had 2 numbers. However, there was only Lu Shihua now. Why were there 2 numbers? Guhan turned around and realized that Jiyu Xuanwu, who was beside him, had filled out a form and handed it to the attendant. Then, he also received a number from the attendant. The attendant probably saw that Jiyu Xuanwu and Guhan were together, so he said there were 2 people. What are you doing? Guhan pulled Jiyu Xuanwu to the side and scolded him softly. It seemed that Guhan was really like Jiyu Xuanwu's father. What do you mean? Don't you understand? I want to be a sword-bearer. I promised by Tai that we would be friends in real life. Jiyu Xuanwu said confidently. But you are Yuan Ku. Yuan Ku can't be a sword-bearer, Guhan said. You are a human. Jiyu Xuanwu paused. I am your daughter, and I am also a human. For the first time, Guhan felt that Jiyu Xuanwu might really be his daughter. Chapter 835. It's here. Let's go check the amount of sword essence in your body. Guhan brought Lu Shihua and Jiyu Xuanwu to the entrance of the examination center and prepared to enter examination room number 7 with Lu Shihua. Aren't you going in with me? At this time, Jiyu Xuanwu suddenly shouted at Guhan. I won't accompany you. Jiyu Han replied coldly. Fat. Who wants you to accompany me? Jiyu Xuanwu spat and rushed into examination room number 8 alone, leaving behind a calm Guhan and a similarly unhappy Lu Shihua. All right, little sister, you are very amazing. You actually have such a high amount of innate sword essence. The person in charge of examining Lu Shihua's body was an old nurse in her 60s. After the results of the examination came out, she said to Lu Shihua with a face full of smiles. Old woman, I only see such a high amount of innate sword essence once or twice a month. Little sister, you must do your best. Strive to find a sword lady that belongs to you and contribute your strength to the rise of mankind. Of course, the old nurse didn't know Lu Shihua's true identity. If she knew that the little girl in front of her was actually the master of the sword pavilion in Yuzhang City, I don't think she would speak to Lu Shihua with such a tone and attitude. And you, young man, you also have to do your best. Strive to become a sword bearer yourself. Otherwise, when your girlfriend becomes a sword bearer, she won't like you anymore, the old nurse said to Guhan. The old nurse's eyes didn't seem to be very good. She didn't seem to see that Guhan had 3 sword scabbards hanging on his body. Thank you, Granny Nurse. Lu Shihua said sweetly and then took his examination form. The number 365 quarks was clearly written on the sword essence column. Having more than 300 quarks of innate sword essence was indeed a very amazing thing. It was already at the level of 1 in 10,000. However, it couldn't be compared to Liuyan Ling's innate sword essence, which was close to 10,000. It's exactly a year's time. Guhan saw this number of sword essence and couldn't help but mutter in his heart. He vaguely felt that this number seemed to have a special meaning. But what exactly did this meaning mean? Guhan didn't know. Guhan didn't have much time to think before he suddenly heard a shocking scream from the room next door, as if something terrible had happened. Not good. That's Jiyu Xuanwu's examination room. The the scream came from there. Guhan immediately stood up from his chair and looked at the room nervously. Could it be that the medical equipment has discovered Jiyu Xuanwu's true identity and found out that she is a Yuan Ku? Thinking of this possibility, Ji Yuhan felt a chill run down his spine. Because of the incident with Ku Rokin, the entire Yangjing city was now extremely sensitive to the situation of Yuan Ku's infiltration. If others were to discover Jiyu Xuanwu's true identity, Tian Tian knew if he would end up like Ku Rokin, locked up in jail. Guhan rushed out of the examination room 7 and instantly appeared in the examination room 8. Ji Yuhan took a closer look, only to see that the nurse in the 8th examination room was trembling as she held onto a checklist in her hand, while Jiyu Xuanwu was sitting there with a smile on his face, without the slightest bit of fear. Sorry. No one saw Guhan's movements clearly and the checklist in the nurse's hand appeared in Guhan's hand. Guhan made up his mind that if this checklist found out that Jiyu Xuanwu was a Yuan Ku, then Guhan would immediately destroy this checklist, then knock out the nurse and destroy all the data here to see if he could hide Jiyu Xuanwu's true identity. If it really didn't work, then Guhan could only escape from Yangjing City. As long as he left Yangjing City, Guhan believed that no one would be able to catch him again. Race, Human Han. Guhan first looked at the position of the race on the checklist and then let out a long sigh of relief. Fortunately, it seemed that Jiyu Xuanwu's human form was very perfect. Even such a sophisticated instrument could not detect her identity as a human and Yuan Ku hybrid. But the real identity of Jiyu Xuanwu was not discovered. Then why did the nurse scream? Did she see a ghost? At this time, the nurse finally found out that the checklist in her hand had disappeared. She looked around inexplicably and saw that Ji Yuhan had suddenly appeared in the examination room, and in Ji Yuhan's hand was the examination report that she had just been looking at. "What are you doing? Who allowed you to take the doctor's things?" The nurse immediately asked bluntly. "I wanted to ask you, why did you scream just now?" Guhan did not answer, but asked the nurse a question. "Oh right. Why did I scream?" The nurse thought blankly, then suddenly thought of something and screamed again. "Ah!" The nurse pointed at Jiyu Xuanwu and screamed, "She's not human. She's not human." When Guhan heard this, he immediately became a little nervous. Could it be that the nurse found evidence that Jiyu Xuanwu was not human from the other data on the checklist? She's a genius. A super genius. The #1 genius in the world, unparalleled in the world. The nurse's next words made Guhan's whole face stiffen. Then, he immediately looked at the checklist in his hand and directly looked at the place where the sword element number was written. The red 5-digit number 95628 almost blinded Guhan's eyes. It was actually a number close to 100,000. So far, who had the highest innate sword element among humans? Some people said it was Kunzu, because Kunzu directly synchronized with the famous swordswoman. Later, Kunzu also admitted that his innate sword element was around 15,000 points. However, this view was not recognized by everyone because there was no way to detect sword element in that era. All the sword element was estimated by later generations and could not be used as an accurate basis. When humans had an accurate method to detect sword element, the highest recorded innate sword element was 14,893 quarks. This was a number that blinded everyone, and this number had not changed for more than 700 years. In the past 700 years, no one had been able to surpass this number. Moreover, according to statistics, the average innate sword element of humans was constantly declining, so it was almost impossible to find someone who could surpass this number in the future. But now, this number had been surpassed by 6 times, reaching a shocking 95,628 quarks. This was a number that could almost destroy all human common sense. No wonder the nurse screamed after seeing this number. If Guhan was the nurse, he would also scream. Seeing that there were people gradually looking over to see what was going on, Guhan immediately put the checklist into his dimensional pocket and said to the nurse calmly, "What are you screaming for? What's there to scream about? Is there anything strange about this? Isn't there anything strange about this?" After hearing Guhan's words, the nurse finally stopped screaming. This is an innate sword element of 95,628 quarks. She has already created a record that humans can no longer break. Who told you this is innate sword element? Guhan said disdainfully. This was all her acquired sword element, and her real innate sword element was only a few hundred quarks. That's impossible. The nurse was at a loss. The checklist she brought clearly states that she's only 18 years old, and she's an ordinary person. How could she have acquired the acquired sword element? You've been tricked by her. Guhan glared at Jiyu Xuanwu fiercely. She only looks young. She's already 28 years old, and she's not an ordinary person. She's a famous sword-rank swordsman. She usually likes to play tricks on people. I apologize on her behalf. So that's how it is. So she's already a famous sword-rank swordsman. I knew it. How could a human have 95,628 quarks of innate sword element? Perhaps it was because the truth of 95,628 had destroyed her worldview too much that the nurse's subconscious could not accept it at all. Therefore, when Guhan gave her a barely acceptable explanation, the nurse instinctively accepted it. Even after Guhan left examination room 8 with Jiyu Xuanwu, the nurse was still immersed in the incident and could not extricate herself from it for a long time. It was not until 10 minutes later that the nurse suddenly came to a realization and patted her head. That's not right. This data should have been provided by the personal terminal. It's impossible for her to have faked her age and identity. Thinking of this, the nurse immediately turned on her computer and wanted to look up the information on Jiyu Xuanwu. However, all the information on Jiyu Xuanwu had disappeared. No matter how hard the nurse searched, she could not find any trace of Jiyu Xuanwu. This discovery immediately made the nurse silent. The nurse, who usually liked to watch all kinds of conspiracy theories, immediately felt as if she had discovered a shocking secret. This secret must be related to some secret plan of the human race. That was why Jiyu Xuanwu's information was deleted in an instant. Moreover, there might even be people coming to kill her immediately. Thinking of this, the nurse felt a kind of earth-shattering terror. Then, she fled home without even applying for leave. She packed some things and hid in a childhood friend's house for a whole month. By the time she realized that it seemed like no one was coming to kill her, it was already too late. Due to continuous absenteeism for a month, the Swordsman Service Center had already fired her. Moreover, because of this terrible absenteeism record, it was very difficult for her to find another job. After more than 3 months of failure to find a job, the nurse felt that her spirit and body were greatly damaged. She concocted a bottle of high-concentration sleeping pills and drank it. In the end, she passed away miserably from this world. No matter what, Guhan did not expect that a casual lie of his would cause someone to walk into a dead end. Therefore, people should not casually lie to others. Who knows, someone might die from your lies. Chapter 836. How is it? Did you set it as confidential? Guhan asked Lu Shihua, who was next to her. After leaving the inspection room 8 with the Jiyu Xuanwu, Guhan immediately asked Lu Shihua to set all the information about the Jiyu Xuanwu as an SSS level confidential in Yuzhang City. Since the Jiyu Xuanwu's personal terminal belonged to Yuzhang City, Lu Shihua, as the head of the Sword Garret in Yuzhang City, could naturally do this easily. At the same time, because this was an SSS-level confidential information belonging to Yuzhang City, only the 2 most powerful people in Yuzhang City could read this information unless it was inquired in the name of the Sword Garret. This was also the reason why the nurse couldn't find the information of the solid black tortoise when she tried to check it again. Because the level of the hospital was not even qualified to know this information, let alone read it. 95628 Innate Sword Essence. Is she really a human? Even though Lu Shihua had read this information countless times, she couldn't help but feel shocked every time she saw this number. She felt that the Jiyu Xuanwu was no longer a human. The lie that Guhan used to deceive the nurse naturally couldn't fool Lu Shihua. Moreover, Guhan didn't want to lie to Lu Shihua. This was because the Jiyu Xuanwu couldn't be hidden from people who were close to her, and there was no need to hide it from people who were close to her. Ji Han didn't want to be like those idiot protagonists in those 8 p.m. family ethics TV series, deliberately hiding things that were not necessary to be hidden from the person who loved him, causing all kinds of misunderstandings under the inexplicable intention of doing something for his own good. In the end, both sides suffered a lot, and then he could easily pull out 20 to 30 episodes of bitter drama. Liu Shihua was destined to be Jendi, so Guhan didn't want any misunderstandings between her and Liu Shihua, which would lead to the rupture of their relationship. Therefore, Guhan explained to Liu Shihua, Jiyu Xuanwu's situation is very special. She is both a human and a Yuan Ku. Her physique can freely switch between the two. As a Yuan Ku, she was already close to the level of a nether-level Yuan Ku. Now that she's a human, she might also have the sword essence of a nether-level Yuan Ku. Guhan told Liu Shihua his conjecture in full detail, but Liu Shihua was still in a state of confusion. Humph. Why don't you tell her I'm your daughter? Are you not willing to admit your mother's existence to anyone? Not willing to admit to anyone that you had a relationship with a Yuan Ku, and even gave birth to a daughter? Hearing that Guhan did not take the initiative to confess that she was her daughter, Jiyu Xuanwu seemed to be somewhat angry. Ha! Liu Shihua was still confused. What daughter? He didn't understand at all. I said, I don't know your mother at all, and I don't know what's going on with you claiming to be my daughter. Before I completely understand the truth of the matter, I will never admit that you are my daughter. Guhan knocked Jiyu Xuanwu's head hard, then knocked Liu Shihua's head, then asked, do you understand now? No. Liu Shihua shook his head hard, but I believe in Master. Whatever Master says, I will do. Millimeter. I still need to make a subjective judgment, but I believe that Master is definitely right. Guhan nodded in satisfaction, then held Liu Shihua's hand. Let's go. Let's go to the exam hall now. We only have an hour left. The layout of the exam venue in Yangjing City was similar to that in Yuzhang City. There was a row of benches for people to rest on outside the door. Thinking back to the time when Guhan learned telepathy from Liunian Ling on this bench, he felt quite emotional thinking about it now. Liu Shihua and Jiyu Xuanwu were both in the exam venue. Originally, Guhan didn't want Jiyu Xuanwu to go in, but Jiyu Xuanwu strongly requested to go in. Thinking about it, Guhan didn't stop Jiyu Xuanwu. This was because Guhan really wanted to know if this cheap daughter of his could synchronize with the sword lady in the real world. But soon, Guhan regretted this decision because Jiyu Xuanwu's voice became noisy in Guhan's ears. Hey! Let me ask you, which swordsman killed Sora Aoi? Also, this winter horse Hisha and Xiao Mu Seng Shuatsai, which one is the mistress and which one is the bitch? And this? Yuenko, who turned over a new leaf and helped the humans defeat the Martyr's Palace? For some reason, Jiyu Xuanwu also knew telepathy. Then, Jiyu Xuanwu threw all the questions on the exam to Guhan and asked Guhan to answer them for him. He didn't know who came up with the exam questions in Yangjing City. Out of the 10 questions, there were actually 2 or 3 that even Ji Yuhan couldn't answer. This was the super top student Ji Yuhan who scored more than 1,900 points in yesterday's Elite 8 Academy's assembly. There were actually 20 to 30% of the questions that Guhan couldn't answer. For example, this Sora Aoi's name, Guhan hadn't even heard of it before. Winter Horse Hisha and Xiao Mu Seng Shuatsai had heard of them once or twice. They were a pair of enemies in the Free City. When they visited Yangjing City, they made quite a lot of jokes. This little mistress Ji Yuhan knew what it meant, but what the hell was this bitch? Guhan had never heard of this term before. As for Yuenko, who had once helped humans destroy the Martyr's Palace, Ji Yuhan knew her very well. However, whenever he thought of her name, he would always feel a little sad. It would be great if he could see her again. She's King Arthur Artoria. Guhan still told Jiyu Xuanwu this name. King Arthur. Artoria? What a familiar name. Jiyu Xuanwu smacked his lips. I remember now. My mom has a set of armor in her room. It's said to belong to that King Arthur. It's very precious, and I won't even be able to touch it. What? What did you say? Ji Yuhan stood up abruptly, scaring the people around him who were waiting for his friend to finish his exam. I said I have a set of King Arthur's armor at home. What's wrong? Is there a problem? Jiyu Xuanwu asked out of the blue. Not at the moment. Guhan sat back down. It seemed like he had to follow Jiyu Xuanwu to her home. Perhaps he could find clues about Artoria there. Husband, before you become an immortal sword wielder, you must not try to find news about Sister Artoria. Even if you accidentally find news about Sister Artoria, you must not look for her. Husband, please promise Qing this, okay? At this moment, Yi Qing's words rang in Guhan's ears again. This was the promise that Yi Qing had made Jiyu Han make at the end of the Heroes Begin at the End Instance dungeon. Jiyu Han had also promised Yi Qing that he would not try to find Artoria before he became a sword immortal level swordsman. But when the clues about Artoria were really placed in front of Guhan, Guhan hesitated again. Such a great opportunity was placed in front of her. Was she really going to give it up? With this starting point, my combat ability is no longer at the top of the meteor level Yuan Ku. Even if I'm facing a universe level Yuan Ku, I should be able to guarantee that I won't die. Does this mean that I already have the ability of an immortal sword wielder? And this is just Artoria's armor. It can't be considered a clue. Even if this is a clue, as long as I don't really look for Artoria, it shouldn't be considered as breaking my promise to Yi Qing. This was the process of deceiving oneself and others. Although he knew that this was breaking his promise to Yi Qing, under Guhan's own consolation, this promise did not seem to be broken. In short, when a person's heart was desperate to do something, then all previous promises would become a laughable joke. Just like those men who swore to quit smoking, they still had cigarettes in their mouths in the end. Master! Master! Lu Shihua's concerned voice suddenly came into her ears. Guhan looked up and saw that Lu Shihua had already left the examination room. Obviously, she had already finished all the questions. How did the exam go? Guhan stopped thinking about Artoria and turned to care about Lu Shihua's results. This was because Guhan knew that before she met him, Lu Shihua only attended elementary school and had no knowledge about sword wielder. Furthermore, he knew nothing about sword bearers. Although he had studied a lot of knowledge about sword bearers after meeting Lin Li, it would still be quite difficult for him to pass the test. Your disciple is not capable. I only scored 90 points. I've let you down, Master, Lu Shihua said with shame. Not bad, this result is already very good. Guhan nodded. This result was already beyond Guhan's expectations. It seemed that Lu Shihua had not been idle during this period of time. Instead, she had furiously studied a lot of knowledge about sword wielder. Otherwise, she would not have been able to score 90 points in this exam where the average score was only about 65 points. Haha, I scored 95 points. Following closely behind Lu Shihua, Jiyu Xuanwu also walked out with a face full of smiles and announced his score loudly. When Lu Shihua heard Jiyu Xuanwu's score, her face was first filled with shame. Then, as if she had realized something, she looked at Guhan with a face full of doubt, as if she was asking Guhan. Since Jiyu Xuanwu was half human and half Yuan Ku, he should have never been to school. How could he score 95 points, which even a genius student would find hard to do? Ahem. Guhan did not answer Lu Shihua's question. Of course, he could not tell Lu Shihua that he had actually answered almost all the questions on the exam paper. However, on the basis that he could not confirm the correct answers to 20% of the questions, Jiyu Xuanwu actually scored 95 points. It seemed that if he did not become a sword wielder, being a teacher would not be a bad choice. All right. It's time to meet your sword mistress. Guhan patted Lu Shihua's shoulder. I think the two-winged angel sword mistress should be impatient. Chapter 837. You still have the nerve to come here? As soon as he brought Lu Shihua and Jiyu Xuanwu into the sword pavilion, he was blocked by an angry sword wielder. Guhan remembered this sword wielder. The last time he came to the sword pavilion to confront sword immortal Tian Hen, this sword wielder was one of the sword pavilion's forces. He stood in front of Guhan, but was easily KO'd by Guhan. Why wouldn't I have the nerve to come here? Guhan snorted coldly. Am I the one who committed the crime? Even though you're not the one who committed the crime, it was your companion. Are you going to deny it? The sword wielder said indignantly. What a joke. Since when did the sword committee add a rule that implicates others? Even if Ku Rokin is my son, I have nothing to do with his crime. Why can't I come here? Guhan's words made the sword wielder speechless. You. The sword wielder wanted to say something else, but he was interrupted by someone on the second floor. All right, let them in. Our Yangjing city still cares about our reputation. Besides, since when did the sword pavilion fall to such a state? The person on the second floor said coldly. Guhan felt that the voice was familiar. He looked up and saw that it was indeed an acquaintance he hadn't seen in a long time in Yangjing City. Junior Guhan pays his respects to Master Wuzhang Shifang. Guhan bowed respectfully to the person. This person was none other than sword immortal Wuzhang Shifang, who had saved Guhan's life in the Mailing mountain range. He didn't expect to see him in the sword pavilion at this time. Come up. With that, Wuzhang Shifang disappeared from the railing on the second floor. The sword wielder could only let Guhan lead Lu Shihua and Jiyu Xuanwu into the second floor of the sword pavilion. There was a sofa and a tea table on the second floor of the sword pavilion. However, Wuzhang Shifang didn't sit on the sofa. Instead, he knelt in front of the tea table. His Kusanagi no Tsurugi was placed beside him. This was the standard posture of the Fuso warriors. It seemed that Wuzhang Shifang had not completely forgotten where he belonged like most of the Fuso bloodline. Long time no see, my lord. Since Wuzhang Shifang was kneeling there, Guhan naturally didn't dare to sit on the sofa. He could only copy Wuzhang Shifang and kneel in front of the coffee table. I saw you a few days ago. Wuzhang Shifang took out a small teapot and 2 small teacups from his dimensional pocket. The tea in the teapot seemed to have been brewed, so Wuzhang Shifang directly filled 2 small teacups, and then placed 1 cup in front of Guhan. Drink. Good tea. Guhan took a deep breath of the fragrance of the tea, and then finished the tea in the teacup in 1 gulp. 3 months ago, this junior would have never imagined that one day I would actually be able to receive the treatment of being personally poured tea by Lord Shifang. 3 months ago, I also didn't think that one day I would actually be willing to pour tea for you. Wuzhang Shifang smiled. He really didn't expect it. 3 months ago, the ancient sword-level sword wielder who knelt in front of him and begged him to accept him as a disciple had actually grown into a famous sword-level sword wielder. Moreover, he had defeated the current descendant of the Liuonian family, Liuonian Ling, and became the #1 sword wielder in the famous sword level. Then let this junior pour tea for my lord. Guhan took the teapot from Wuzhang Shifang's hand and filled the teacups for himself and Wuzhang Shifang. Good tea. Wuzhang Shifang took a deep breath of the fragrance of the tea, and then finished the tea in the teacup in 1 gulp. Tell me, why did you come to my Yangjing City Sword Pavilion? Don't tell me that you can already synchronize the coordination of a spirit sword level sword niece. No, how could this junior's speed reach such a level? Guhan looked at Lu Shihua and Jiyu Xuanwu behind him. I have 2 friends who need to synchronize the sword niece, so I accompanied them here. After all, I might have to rush to Shanhai Pass tonight, and the next time I come to Yangjing City will be 3 years later. How do you know that you have to rush to Shanhai Pass? Wuzhang Shifang blinked his eyes. I'm afraid there are no more than 10 people in Yangjing City who know about this. The sword spirit of the Gui Palace is in a hurry to find us, the strongest among the famous sword-level sword wielder. What else could it be for? If you use your brain a little, you can guess it. Guhan filled the teacup in front of him again. I'm curious as to why my lord is in the sword pavilion. Could it be that my lord is going to ascend the throne? How dare you make fun of me? Wuzhang Shifang's tone was filled with anger, but his expression was full of smiles. Sword immortal Tian Heng has left, so the sword pavilion naturally cannot be without a leader. Therefore, thanks to His Majesty Hao Tian's favor, the temporary sword pavilion of Yangjing City has fallen into my hands. After a few days, when sword immortal Tian Heng passes away, things should be settled. Congratulations in advance, my lord. Guhan cupped his hands at Wuzhang Shifang. Come on, I can't compare to you, the previous sword pavilion master of Yuzhang City. Wuzhang Shifang snatched his teapot from Guhan's hand and filled his cup. There are only a few minutes left until 8 o'clock. Hurry up and ask your friend to synchronize the sword niece. Turin, take the 2 ladies with you to synchronize the sword niece. Let them try what they want, but don't play any tricks, understand? Wu Zhang Shifang said to the sword wielder who was kneeling at the door to stop Gu Han. Although the sword wielder's face was disgusting as if he had eaten *tea, he had no right to refuse because of Wu Zhang Shifang's order. He could only take Lu Shihua and Jiyu Xuanwu to synchronize the sword niece. Gu Han, do you remember that you once begged me to accept you as my disciple? After seeing Lu Shihua and Jiyu Xuanwu leave, Wu Zhang Shifang suddenly mentioned this matter. Of course I remember. I will never forget this. Gu Han's face stiffened, but he immediately returned to normal. Why did Wu Zhang Shifang suddenly mention this? Does he want to accept me as his disciple again? However, today was different from that time. At that time, in order to save his life, Gu Han naturally knelt in front of Wu Zhang Shifang and begged him to accept him as his disciple. But now, Gu Han's strength was comparable to a spirit sword-level sword wielder, and he also had a good master like Liu Lei in China. How could he still want to be Wu Zhang Shifang's disciple? And I also gave you a condition at that time, saying that as long as you can become the champion of the Octagon tournament, I will accept you as my disciple. Unexpectedly, you actually became the champion of the Octagon tournament today. Speaking of this, Wu Zhang Shifang laughed even more happily. Sir, you must be joking. The last round of the Octagon tournament has not yet been held, and Yangjing City is only a few points away from us. How could this junior accept it? What if I become the champion of the Octagon tournament? The meaning of Gu Han's words was very clear, which was to tell Wu Zhang Shifang that he no longer wanted to be Wu Zhang Shifang's disciple. That's not right. Just now, the organizing committee has already made a decision. The results of these 4 rounds will determine the winner, so you are already the well-deserved champion of the Octagon tournament. Wu Zhang Shifang once again drank the tea in the teacup in one gulp. Sir, at that time, it was different from the past. This junior no longer dares to bother sir. In the future, Gu Han will go on alone. There is no need for sir to waste your energy. Gu Han continued to refuse. Are you really not going to reconsider? Wu Zhang Shifang clenched his fists. As far as I know, Sword Immortal Yun Xiao may not last past next year. Without senior Yun Xiao's suppression, those old guys in Yuzhang City are bound to make a scene. At that time, those old fellows in Yuzhang City will definitely cause a ruckus. If you don't have someone to support you, then I'm afraid you and your disciple won't be able to live so smoothly. It's just a position. What is it compared to the great cause of mankind? As long as everyone in Yuzhang City can work together, then this junior and this junior's disciple can even give up their buttocks. Ji Yuhan said with a hidden meaning. Good. Wu Zhang Shifang sighed. I'm afraid the biggest stupid thing I've done in my life was not accepting you as my disciple 3 months ago. Instead, it was Liu Lei who took advantage of it and obtained such a good successor. Sword Immortal Shifang, you flatter me. This junior doesn't deserve it. Gu Han bowed again. All right, since you don't want to be my disciple, then I'll make a deal with you. With a wave of Wu Zhang Shifang's hand, the teapot and teacups on the coffee table disappeared without a trace. Ji Yuhan, let me ask you, do you know what my, Wu Zhang Shifang's, ambition is? I do. Gu Han's answer made Wu Zhang Shifang speechless. According to Wu Zhang Shifang's original plan, Gu Han would definitely not know what he was thinking. Then, he could take the opportunity to talk and pull Gu Han to his side. But when Ji Yuhan said that he knew, Wu Zhang Shifang didn't know how to continue. Then tell me, what is my ambition? At sir's level, your greatest ambition is to become an emperor and become an emperor sword wielder. Gu Han smiled and said, but this is a well-known ambition. You don't have to make me guess, so I guess your ambition must be something else. At this point, Ji Yuhan paused. For example, recreating Fusang. Chapter 838. Good. 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 Wu Zhang Shifang said good 3 times in a row. Finally, he slammed the coffee table, shattering it into pieces. The younger generation will surpass the older in time. The younger generation will surpass us in time. I didn't expect that the greatest ambition of my, Zhang Shifang's, life would actually come out of the mouth of an 18-year-old child. The younger generation will surpass us in time. The younger generation will surpass us in time. That's right. My greatest ambition in life is to take back Fusang Island that belongs to us and build the 9th base city of the human race, Fusang City, on Fusang Island. Wu Zhang Shifang looked at Guhan with glowing eyes. Guhan, are you willing to help me? Are you willing to help me build the greatest enterprise in the past hundreds of years? Let's talk about it later. Guhan did not reject Wu Zhang Shifang outright this time. Let's talk about it after you become the emperor. Otherwise, everything will be for naught. Of course. Then can you promise me that after I, Wu Zhang Shifang, ascend to the throne, you'll lend me a hand? Wu Zhang Shifang pressed on with his questions. While Guhan was about to answer the question, he heard an exclamation from the first floor. Guhan recognized the voice. It was the voice of Turin, who had been sent by Wu Zhang Shifang to lead the way for Lu Shihua. At this moment, the sword wielder screamed. Could it be that something had happened to Lu Shihua? What's going on? Wu Zhang Shifang stood up and went to the first floor to stand next to Turin. That man. That woman. That woman. Turin murmured for a long time before he finally said, that woman synchronized the double-winged angel sword. Phew. Ji Yuhan heaved a sigh of relief after hearing Turin's words. Although Lu Shihua had synchronized the double-winged angel swords in the game, there was still a possibility that it would fail in reality. Therefore, Guhan was still worried. Now, after hearing the confirmation from Turin, Ji Yuhan could finally put down his worries. What? It's actually the two-winged angel sword. Wu Zhang Shifang was also taken aback when he heard this name. As an immortal sword wielder, how could he not understand the meaning behind the double-winged angel sword? Wu Zhang Shifang immediately turned to look at Guhan. I finally understand why you insisted on giving the position of Sword Pavilion Master to an ordinary person, little friend Guhan. It seems like you already knew that this Lu Shihua could synchronize with the Sword of Angels, right? I don't lie in front of a real person. That's true. Guhan nodded and readily admitted this point. When the world heard the news, they all thought that you and old man Liu Lei in Yuzhong City had gone mad. Now it seems that we were all fooled by you. You're handing the Sword Pavilion over to an ordinary person. You're obviously handing it over to a sword emperor who's already a sword emperor. No matter what happens in the future, Yuzhong City will definitely have His Majesty Jendi. My young friend Guhan, you're destined to have another disciple of Jendi. Congratulations. When I see her later, should I address her as Your Majesty in advance? What's there to celebrate? What Her Majesty? At this moment, Jiyu Xuanwu ran out from a corner. Behind her was a fair-skinned, gentle-looking young lady. So it's the Iron Lady. Wu Zhang Shifang heaved a sigh of relief when he saw the young lady. It seemed like the other young lady that Guhan brought over did not have any amazing talent. She merely synchronized one of the 3 foundational Jendi swords, the Iron Lady. Wait. This sword lady doesn't seem to be an ordinary man-made sword lady. She's a natural sword lady. Wu Zhang Shifang took a closer look at the Iron Lady. Although her expression was calm, her eyes were filled with a lively light. It was clearly not the eyes of the dull man-made sword ladies. However, Wu Zhang Shifang vaguely remembered that the natural sword ladies of the 3 foundational sword ladies already had their own sword bearers. Turin, has the Iron Lady's natural sword lady returned to the sword pavilion? Turin asked behind Wu Zhang Shifang. Master Shifang, the Iron Lady's original sword-bearer passed away yesterday due to old age. She was only sent back to the sword pavilion last night, Turin replied. My young friend Guhan, your friend is quite lucky. She came at the right time. Otherwise, she would have been snatched away by an ordinary person in a few days, Wu Zhang Shifang said with a smile. He was right. The reason they were called the 3 foundational sword maidens was naturally because they were the most easily coordinated sword maidens among all the ancient sword-grade sword maidens. Whenever the 3 foundational sword ladies returned to the sword pavilion, many ordinary people would immediately fight to synchronize with them. Within a few days, they would find a new sword-bearer. This was why Wu Zhang Shifang said that Jiyu Xianwu was quite lucky. If Jiyu Xianwu had come a few days later, the Iron Lady would have been synchronized away. Luckily, he only synchronized 1 foundational sword lady. I thought this Guhan had brought 2 geniuses with him, Wu Zhang Shifang thought to himself. If Jiyu Xianwu was destined to be a future Jendi like Lu Shihua, he would be so envious that he would vomit blood. Let's go. Let's continue. Jiyu Xianwu did not even look at Wu Zhang Shifang. He pulled on Turin's sleeve and urged him. What are you talking about? Continue what? Turin was confused. Didn't you synchronize with your ancient sword lady? But I don't have a treasured sword yet. I still need to synchronize with a treasured sword, Jiyu Xianwu said and dragged Turin to the second floor like a pig. Innate sword element, 1,000 quarks. Wu Zhang Shifang, who thought he was not envious, was envious again. It turned out that the second person Jiyu Han had brought was a genius with more than 1,000 quarks of innate sword essence. Although it was not very rare, there were only 1 or 2 geniuses like this every year. Fortunately, 1 or 2 geniuses every year were still within the acceptable range of Wu Zhang Shifang. Wu Zhang Shifang himself had recruited quite a few geniuses with more than 1,000 quarks of innate sword essence. Jiyu Xianwu dragged Turin away. Not long after, Lu Shihua, who was followed by a 2-winged angel in the air, returned to Guhan and Wu Zhang Shifang. Master. Lu Shihua respectfully bowed to Jiyu Han, and then bowed to Wu Zhang Shifang, and then silently stood behind Jiyu Han, acting as a human backdrop. That's great. Wu Zhang Shifang was filled with envy when he saw this. He had so many geniuses, but they could not compare to Jendi, who was destined to be a genius in the future. After that, Guhan and Wu Zhang Shifang seemed to have nothing to say. After a long silence, Jiyu Xianwu broke the silence. This time, there was another sword mistress behind Jiyu Xianwu. This sword maiden was dressed in a blue hanfu. She had a golden crown on her head and a pair of milky white stockings on her legs. She had a head of long blue hair and looked to be about 15 or 16 years old. She was a cute young lady who looked to be about 15 or 16 years old. This sword mistress is. When Guhan saw the girl's appearance, he immediately searched for the faces of treasured sword mistresses and finally found a name. Is this sword mistress Xiao? Guhan pointed out the name of this sword mistress. I am Xiao Li. Greetings. Sword mistress Xiao Li nodded slightly at Guhan and the others. Her words and actions carried the demeanor of an emperor. She seemed to be a sword mistress of the way of the king. In fact, the beautiful sword was indeed a sword of the way of the king. Its original owner was the founding emperor of the Eastern Han dynasty, Liu Xiu. It was said that the sword was forged by Liu Xiu and his empress, Yin Lihua. Therefore, the 2 characters in their names were used to name the sword, which was why it was called the beautiful sword. As a sword mistress of the way of the king, and a sword mistress of a heaven-defying son of the realm like Liu Xiu, Xiao Li's sword should have been a famous sword. But for some reason, Liu Xiu was considered the most low-key founding emperor. Moreover, this Xiao Li sword was mostly placed in the palace as an ornament after it was forged. Later on, it was buried with Liu Xiu and Yin Lihua. Unexpectedly, the 3-foot sword of her predecessor, Liu Bang, the founding emperor of the Western Han dynasty, had a world-shaking legend like the White Snake Uprising. Naturally, it could only be ranked as a sword mistress of the sword pavilion. However, the beautiful sword was still very powerful among the treasured sword maidens. It was ranked 8th in the treasured sword record and could be considered as the number 1 treasured sword maiden in Yangjing City's sword pavilion. Haha. Not bad, not bad. Wu Zhang Shifang laughed dryly a few times. The 3 best treasured swords in the world were all in the Yuzhong sword pavilion. The Yangjing sword pavilion really didn't have many treasured swords that could be taken out. This Xiao Li sword was already the best sword mistress of the sword pavilion in Yangjing City. Who would have thought that the woman brought by Guhan would be able to coordinate with it? Wu Zhang Shifang's heart ached when he thought of this. All right. I think it's about time. Guhan, you should go to the sword committee and meet with the sword spirit of Gui Hall. Let's leave the sword pavilion together. Wu Zhang Shifang was afraid that if he stayed in the sword pavilion any longer, the sword mistress of the sword pavilion would be inexplicably coordinated away by someone else. However, in this world, what one was afraid of would happen. Therefore, Jiyu Xuanwu immediately said, "There's no hurry. I still want to go to the 3rd floor. Young lady, Why do you want to go to the 3rd floor? That's where the sword mistresses of the famous sword mistresses are kept. Wu Zhang Shifang laughed dryly. Yes. It's precisely because that's where the sword mistresses of the famous sword mistresses are kept. That's why I want to go there. Jiyu Xuanwu laughed innocently. I still want to coordinate with the sword mistresses of the famous sword mistresses. If it wasn't for Wu Zhang Shifang's profound cultivation, he would have already collapsed in the sword pavilion. Chapter 839. In the end, when Jiyu Xuanwu appeared before Wu Zhang Shifang with her famous sword, the Tai sword, he was on the verge of breaking down. Although the 3-foot sword, which was ranked first in the famous sword record, had already been taken away by Liuanian Ling, it was still a controlled object. Other than those who had been approved, no one else was allowed to touch it. Placing it in the sword pavilion was more like a symbol. As such, the Tai sword was the true number 1 sword maiden in the Swallow Sword Pavilion. The Tai sword was ranked 2nd in the famed swords record, and due to the fact that the 3-foot sword rarely appeared in the world, the Tai sword was the number 1 sword maiden by default. Originally, this Tai sword was prepared to be left to the young talents of Yangjing City, but who would have thought that it would end up in the hands of the people brought by Gu Han? Including the double-winged angel's sword and beautiful sword that had been lost before, in just an hour, Yangjing City's sword pavilion had lost 3 top-notch innate sword ladies. How could Wu Zhongsha not have the urge to cry? Ahem, there are only 5 minutes left. We have to leave immediately. Gu Han looked at the time and found that there were still 5 minutes before 8 p.m. Thus, he began to urge Wu Zhang Shifang to leave. Little friend Gu Han, tell me the truth. What's your relationship with this girl? The girl Wu Zhang Shifang was referring to was naturally Jiyu Xuanwu. After all, everyone in the world knew about the relationship between Lu Shihua and Gu Han, so there was nothing for him to ask. She's my cousin. Gu Han rolled his eyes. She's called Jiyu Xuanwu, a distant cousin of mine. She's been clamoring to come to Yangjing City with me. I didn't expect that she would become a famous swordsman right after her birthday. Cousin. Wu Zhang Shifang pondered for a moment. Little friend Gu Han, is Miss Jiyu Xuanwu suitable for marriage? Or does she have someone that she admires? It's like this. My son is about to turn 18. He's young and talented, but he hasn't found a suitable partner yet. I can see that my little friend Gu Han has extraordinary talent and will definitely become a great person in the future. I wonder if we can become in-laws. Let Miss Jiyu Xuanwu and my son spend more time together. We will be in-laws in the future, Wu Zhang Shifang said very seriously. Wu Zhang Shifang's words almost caused Gu Han to vomit blood. Wu Zhang Shifang actually wanted his own son to marry his own daughter. No, to marry Jiyu Xuanwu. It sounded very absurd, but on second thought, this Wu Zhang Shifang was really astute. He must have seen that he and Jiyu Xuanwu were both genius swordbearers, so he felt that his family's bloodline was extraordinary. He wanted to use the Jiyu family's bloodline to improve his Wu Zhang family's bloodline. More importantly, he and Jiyu Xuanwu were both strong and could become Emperor Sword-level swordbearers in the future. Together with Lu Shihua, who would definitely become Gendi's swordbearer, the future power of Gu Han's family could already be foreseen to be terrifying. If Wu Zhang Shifang became in-laws with him, it would be equivalent to finding a huge backer for the Wu Zhang family in the future. Even if Wu Zhang Shifang could become an emperor, he was already almost 50 years old. He didn't have many more decades to live. The future would belong to young people like Gu Han sooner or later. If Wu Zhang Shifang could receive the care of Gu Han's family after he died, then the Wu Zhang family could still live for a few decades. This Wu Zhang Shifang was really thinking long-term. Well, Gu Han seemed to be seriously thinking about this problem. I have always respected freedom of love. Love and marriage, let them decide for themselves. We shouldn't interfere. If your son and my cousin can get along and develop real feelings for each other, then it's not impossible to become in-laws. If both parties are not fated, then there's no need to force it. Yes, that's the logic. Wu Zhang Shifang nodded his head continuously. He was very confident in his son. He was a handsome young man who had captivated many girls in Yangjing City. He believed that it wouldn't be a problem for him to deal with Jiyu Xuanwu. After we go to Shanhai Pass, I'm afraid Jiyu Xuanwu will stay inside and never come out. Whether your son can see this girl is still a problem. What free love? Gu Han thought indifferently. He didn't plan to let Jiyu Xuanwu fall in love with a human at all. However, if this girl really stays in Shanhai Pass forever, then there's a big problem. A bitter smile appeared on Gu Han's face. This girl actually coordinated with the 3 important sword ladies at the same time. If she stays in Shanhai Pass forever, then wouldn't these 3 sword ladies be like pearls before swine, never to see the light of day? If that's the case, then wouldn't I be the sinner of humanity, causing humanity to lose 3 such important natural-born sword ladies? Thinking of this, Gu Han began to hesitate. He didn't know how to deal with Jiyu Xuanwu. Should he let her stay in Shanhai Pass forever and never come out? Or should he let her abandon her identity as Yuan Ku and become a real human? This was indeed a question worth thinking about. Is everyone here? In the meeting room of the Sword Committee, the sword spirit of Gui Palace glanced at the famous swordsmen sitting on both sides of the meeting table. Among these people were Liuonian Ling, Harry Chang Ruo, Andreevich, Leslie Dracula, and other outstanding young geniuses. There were also some older famous swordsmen present. These swordsmen were sitting on 2 sides. One side was occupied by young people, while the other side was occupied by old people. These people all had different emotions. The young sword-bearers all looked like they were eager to give it a try. They were clearly very confident in their own strength. They felt that their future was to survive in the midst of life and death, and that they were the protagonists of the entire world. They would definitely succeed and make a name for themselves in Shanhai Pass. On the other hand, the old swordsmen weren't as impulsive as the young swordsmen. Their faces were filled with fear. If it was possible, they would want to escape from this meeting room and not get involved in anything related to Shanhai Pass. Sir, there are only 2 people on your list who aren't here yet, a staff member standing next to the sword spirit of Gui Palace said. As the staff member was about to report the names of the 2 missing swordsmen, the sword spirit of Gui Palace waved his hand and said, "There's no need to say it. I can already tell who they are. I didn't expect some people to think that they are the best in the world and boast so arrogantly. I didn't expect them to become deserters. They don't even have the courage to come to this meeting room. What are you going to do to me if I don't come?" The door of the meeting room was pushed open. Gu Han walked into the meeting room. However, Jiyu Xuanwu and Wuzhang Shifang were following behind Gu Han. "The rules of the Sword Committee will deal with you." The sword spirit of Gui Palace glared at him and said in a deep voice, "You don't have to use these rules to scare me. When our Yuzhang city was under attack, I didn't see the rules of the Sword Committee, nor did I see any help." Jiyu Han retorted without hesitation. The rules of the Sword Committee had a strong binding force, because only cities that abided by the rules could receive free assistance from other cities organized by the Sword Committee when they were attacked. If the city didn't follow the rules, the city would be punished and lose a lot of benefits. Therefore, almost every city respected the rules and orders of the Sword Committee. However, 2 months ago, Yuzhang City and the Sword Committee had become enemies. Both sides didn't trust each other anymore. When Yuzhang City was under attack, the Sword Committee did not do a good job. Apart from Yangjing City and 3 other cities that sent reinforcements to Yuzhang City, the other cities didn't send any reinforcements. This was especially true for the city of London, where the sword spirit of Hades belonged. It was said that the reinforcements were lost in the Pacific Ocean after drifting for a month. As for whether the city of London sent reinforcements, only God knew. Moreover, Longsha Jendi, who was responsible for restraining Mountain Paradise, had actually retreated at the critical moment. As a result, Haotian Jendi, who had come from afar, had been threatened by Jehovah and didn't dare to come close to Yuzhang City for reinforcements. Because of this, Gu Han looked down on Longsha Jendi. Of course, Jiyu Han didn't dare to openly say that he no longer abided by the rules of the Sword Committee. Otherwise, if he really broke off the relationship with the Sword Committee, Yuzhang City, which would lose all the immortal sword-bearers, would definitely suffer a great loss when facing the next wave of Yuan Ku's attack. Let me explain on behalf of Guhan. His cousin just coordinated with the sword lady in Yangjing City's sword pavilion. She wasted a little time, so she was a little late. I, Wuzhang Shifang, will take responsibility for this matter. You don't have to blame Guhan. In order to please Guhan, Wuzhang Shifang took the initiative to take responsibility for this matter. However, it wasn't a big deal. They were just a few minutes late. After hearing Wuzhang Shifang's words, even the sword spirit of Gui Palace was too embarrassed to say anything else. He could only bow stiffly to Wuzhang Shifang. Then, the other famous sword-level swordsman came to a sudden realization and bowed to Wuzhang Shifang, the sword spirit of Gui Palace. After getting Guhan and Jiyu Xuanwu to sit down, the sword spirit of Gui Palace said in a low voice, I believe that in the past 2 hours, everyone has learned why I gathered everyone here through various channels. If anyone doesn't know, then I will tell them directly that Shanghai Pass can't hold on any longer. Just 2.5 hours ago, the Shanghai Pass headquarters sent an urgent report to the Sword Committee. The remaining tribes of the Wu people suddenly attacked the Sun Star, the great Ju Tian Star's star banner, as if they had gone crazy. Since the famous sword-level swordsmen have suffered heavy losses, the famous sword-level swordsmen guarding the Sun Star's main star are severely lacking in manpower. So far, 2 of the main stars, the great Ju Tian Star's star banners, have fallen. 6 famous sword-level swordsmen and hundreds of ancient sword-level swordsmen have died on the spot. If this battle continues, I'm afraid that by noon tomorrow, the Sun Star's star formation will collapse. Once that happens, the entire Ju Tian Star's star battle formation will collapse. When that happens, I don't need to tell you what kind of fate humans will suffer. Therefore, according to the Sword Committee's emergency meeting, after the meeting ends at 8:30, everyone is to immediately take the Sword Committee's Super Maglev sports car to Shanghai Pass. You must arrive at Shanghai Pass before 8 o'clock tomorrow morning to support the Sun Star star battle formation and kill all the damn Wu people's tribe. Just as Guhan had predicted, the Shanghai Pass battlefield was in great danger. Chapter 840. Leaving at 8:30? Isn't that a little too hasty? A middle-aged famed swordsman stood up from his seat. Although his legs were trembling, he still managed to stand up. I've just returned from outside the city, and I haven't even had the chance to spend some time with my parents and wife. Can I take a day off and set off tomorrow night? At least let us accompany our loved ones. This might be our last time. No. Before the swordsman could finish his sentence, he was interrupted by the sword spirit of Gui Hall. Shanghai Pass won't last past noon tomorrow. If I allow you to reunite with your loved ones today, everyone here will die at the hands of the 12 Zuwu in a few days. I don't need to waste my breath on which is more important. After hearing the sword spirit's words, the swordsman could only helplessly sit back down. The sword spirit was right. If Shanghai Pass couldn't be defended, then Yangjing City, which was the closest to Shanghai Pass, would definitely be the first to bear the brunt. The 12 Zuwu, who had been accumulating anger for hundreds of years, would definitely target Yangjing City for revenge. If Yangjing City fell, then everyone's families and relatives would not be able to survive. That's right. Even if it's for your loved ones, you can't back down this time. A very majestic and heroic voice sounded from the door. Everyone turned their heads and saw a man wearing a red and yellow robe with a 5-clawed golden dragon and a red-browed baihu embroidered on it walk in. Greetings, Your Majesty Long Shi. When they saw this person, all the swordsmen present, including the sword spirit, Guhan, and the 10-direction sword immortal, knelt on one knee in front of this person. However, there was one person who didn't kneel, and that was Jiyu Xuanwu. This child had never seen Long Shi Gendi's photo before, so he naturally didn't know that this man was one of the 2 Gendis, Long Shi Gendi. However, even if Jiyu Xuanwu knew this, he probably wouldn't kneel. After all, he had grown up with Yuan Ku and didn't have the slightest bit of respect for Gendi. Jiyu Xuanwu didn't kneel, and the 3 sword ladies behind him, Bai Tai, Xiuli, and Taya naturally didn't kneel as well. In reality, none of the sword ladies present knelt. There was not much of a hierarchy between the sword ladies. Even if an ancient sword lady met an emperor sword lady, as long as they did not like her, they would not even bother with her, much less kneel. Ha ha ha. Rise. Rise. Long Jendi didn't seem to mind this at all. He hastily beckoned all the sword-bearers present to get up, and then sat down on the seat of the sword spirit of the Gui Palace. I came all the way here to see the finals of the 8 Academies tournament and to see what young talents we humans have in the future. Long Jendi had an amiable look on his face as he said, but I didn't expect to hear such bad news as soon as I arrived in Yangjing City. It seems that I won't have the opportunity to see the grand occasion of the Elite 8 Academies tournament. Since I won't be able to see the finals of the 8 Academies tournament, then let me give all the young talents a grand farewell. This trip to Shanhai Pass is bound to be full of dangers, and any of you may be left there forever. I also stayed in Shanhai Pass for 3 years, and I know better than you what the situation in Shanhai Pass is like. It is a dangerous place, and even more so a dangerous place. Injuries are commonplace, and death is also rare. I don't know how many of you will be able to appear in front of me again when you return 3 years later. This is really the greatest sorrow of my human race. I had no choice but to throw the elite geniuses to that place generation after generation, and then watch them die helplessly. If I could, I would like to tear down that Shanhai Pass and break that Jutian Star Great Array, so that my human race will never be burdened by Shanhai Pass again and again. But I am incompetent, I can't do it. My greatest ability is to offer you a cup of booze. After saying that, a few drops of tears rolled down from the corner of the Dragon Lion Sword Emperor's eyes. It could be seen that this was not Long Jendi's acting, but his true feelings. Long Jendi admittedly had his selfish side, but when it came to major issues of right and wrong, Long Jendi was still deeply righteous. Long Jendi clearly knew that, apart from those middle-aged and elderly swordsmen, these children in front of him, who had become famous swordsmen at the age of 18, were all among the best geniuses of the human race. This was probably the most powerful wave of geniuses of the human race in the last 100 years. Among this wave of geniuses, it was very likely that the future sword Immortal and Jendi would appear. If I throw a group of geniuses like you into Shanhai Pass, how many of you can come back alive, I really don't know. If some of you die in Shanhai Pass, whether that person will be able to become Jendi and Sword Immortal in the future, I also don't know. But I do know one thing. Shanhai Pass can kill geniuses, but it can also temper them. Among you, 1 or 2 geniuses with the talent of Sword Immortal and Jendi may die. But there will be 3 or 4 Jendi and Sword Immortals who have been tempered between life and death. If you can survive these 3 years, then your future will be bright, and human beings will be proud of you. At this point, Long Jendi's mood had brewed to the extreme. With a wave of his hand, dozens of void gates unexpectedly appeared at the same time, and then from each void gate came out an ordinary blue-rimmed bowl, which was already filled with fragrant wine. Come, everyone, drink this cup of wine. I assure you that after 3 years, I will still be here waiting for you to welcome you. Long Jendi raised the blue-rimmed bowl in front of him. Infected by Long Jendi's imposing manner, even those middle-aged and elderly swordsmen, who were originally somewhat afraid, at this moment, were full of courage and raised their blue-rimmed bowls. As a result, everyone raised their blue-rimmed bowls high, and the whole scene looked like the scene of 108 generals of Liangshan Pass holding a meeting, shouting to enforce justice on behalf of the heavens. However, there were still some incongruous things in this scene, such as the Jiyu Xuanwu. To be reasonable, even a fool would know that it was necessary to wait for Long Jendi to finish drinking before the others could drink this bowl of wine. But our eldest Miss Jiyu Xuanwu did not understand this, but even if she did, she certainly would not care about it. To be reasonable, our eldest Miss Jiyu Xuanwu was still a good child, and had never drunk wine in her life. Therefore, seeing this bowl of fragrant liquid, eldest Miss Jiyu Xuanwu could not resist the temptation. When everyone raised their blue-rimmed bowls high, eldest Miss Jiyu Xuanwu began to gulp the wine down her throat. However, although this wine smelled very fragrant, it was actually not the same when it was drunk. After the eldest Miss Jiyu Xuanwu gulped down the first mouthful, her cheeks swelled up and instantly became red. Poochie. Eldest Miss Jiyu Xuanwu unceremoniously sprayed out the white wine in her mouth. Fortunately, Guhan, who was standing in front of Jiyu Xuanwu, had sharp eyes and quick hands. The sword chi in his hand curled up and wrapped all the liquid with his sword chi, and finally threw the whole sword chi out of the window. An unfortunate passerby outside the window thought that it was raining, and quickly covered himself with his hands. When he came back to his senses, he found that he was already reeking of wine, and when he returned home, he was severely reprimanded by his wife. Seeing a lovely girl suddenly making this action, the present swordsman finally couldn't help but smile, put down the blue-rimmed bowls in their hands, and began to laugh. It was unknown how Long Jendi felt when he saw this scene, but Jendi, after all, was Jendi, and certainly could not lower himself to the level of a little girl. Therefore, Long Jendi could only put down the blue-rimmed bowl in his hands with a gentle smile on his face, looked at Jiyu Xuanwu with interest, and asked with a smile, "Little girl, which city are you from? What's your name?" "My name is..." Before Jiyu Xuanwu had time to speak, she was interrupted by Gu Han. "Your Majesty, she is this junior's cousin. She dropped out of school when she was a child, and has no experience, so she was somewhat impetuous. I hope your Majesty can forgive her." So it turns out to be the cousin of Pavilion Master Gu Han. Long Jendi could not recognize other swordsmen, but this Gu Han, who had fought against him in the Changyang Mountain, and finally kept the Shen Yuan sword, was something that Long Jendi could not recognize. Long Jendi's gaze swept over Jiyu Xuanwu, and then he was stunned to see the three sword ladies behind Jiyu Xuanwu. Except for the white iron sword, which was not worth mentioning, whether it was the beautiful sword or the Tai sword, they were all top sword ladies ranked in the top 10. It seems that this boy's family bloodline is not ordinary. Long Jendi, like Wuzhang Shifang, began to praise the bloodline of Patriarch Gu Han. He was well aware of Gu Han's strength. He possessed the number 1 treasure sword, the heavenly sword, and the Juzi sword, which appeared for the first time in front of the world. Gu Han had already reported the news of the Juzi sword to the Sword Committee General Headquarters, and the Sword Committee General Headquarters also learned that after the ancient sword Lady Qingpin's sword, Gu Han actually had another famous sword, the Juzi sword, which appeared for the first time in the world. Moreover, looking at the data of the Juzi sword, it could already suppress the 1-meter sword and the Tai sword, and become the number 1 sword lady of the famous sword grade. It was said that the Sword Committee General Headquarters had already sent a note to the famous Sword Records Compilation Committee. When the next edition of the famous sword record was released, the second place would not be the original Tai sword, but the Juzi sword. Everyone might find it strange. Wasn't the data of the Juzi sword the number 1 sword lady of the famous sword grade? How could it be tied for second place? Was it because the Juzi sword only surpassed the 1-meter sword in terms of attributes? But who made the 1-meter sword be the sword lady of the people's path, and it had the power of the entire human race behind it? As long as the 1-meter sword was willing, it could even suppress the number 1 sword lady of the spirit sword grade. Therefore, the position of the number 1 sword lady of the famous sword grade could only be placed on the head of the 1-meter sword. Sword spirit of the Gui Palace. Is Miss Jiyu Xuanwu's name on the list? Long Jendi suddenly asked the sword spirit of the Gui Palace beside him. Your Majesty, because Miss Jiyu Xuanwu became a famous sword-grade swordsman 10 minutes ago, she is not listed on the list, the sword spirit of the Gui Palace replied. Then add her name. Long Jendi nodded. Such a small number of people is still a bit tight for the Shanhai Pass. But now, with the appearance of the Tai sword, the strength of the Shanhai Pass can be greatly strengthened. For the safety of the human race, the little girl still has to make a sacrifice. Chapter 841. Unexpectedly, with just a few words, Long Jendi had included Jiyu Shenwu in the list of famous swordbearers who were going to support Shanhai Pass. Regarding this, Gu Han couldn't say that he opposed it, but he also couldn't say that he agreed with it. The reason why he didn't oppose it was that regardless of whether Long Jendi allowed Jiyu Shenwu to join this operation or not, Jiyu Shenwu would eventually go to Shanhai Pass. Therefore, Long Jendi's behavior was meaningless. The reason why he didn't agree was that Jiyu Shenwu's identity would become more troublesome. Now, everyone knew that Jiyu Shenwu was going to Shanhai Pass with Gu Han. If Jiyu Shenwu inexplicably disappeared in Shanhai Pass and couldn't come back, it was bound to arouse some speculations. Of course, these speculations were not without solutions. Gu Han only needed to find an opportunity to make Jiyu Shen Wu pretend to be dead. But in this way, Gu Han would need to bring back all of Jiyu Shen Wu's sword ladies. Cutting off the sword mark between Jiyu Shen Wu and his sword ladies would become a huge problem. Well, there were still 3 years left. Gu Han was also too lazy to think about these things. The boat would naturally straighten out when it came to the bridgehead. After being interrupted by Jiyu Shen Wu, Long Shijendi was embarrassed to make everyone drink together like before. Therefore, the imposing manner that the sword-bearers had summoned with great difficulty relaxed again. After Long Shijendi said a few words of encouragement, it was already 8:30 p.m. It was time for everyone to set off. But at this time, the door of the conference room was pushed open again. This time, it was the aggressive sword immortal Tiansun who came in. Behind him were 2 old men with 5 scabbards. Obviously, these 2 old men were also sword immortals of Yangjing City. Sword spirit of Ming Palace, what do you mean by this? What right do you have to snatch people from the hands of our Yangjing City? Sword immortal Tiansun asked the sword spirit of Ming Palace as soon as he came in. What's the matter? What's with all this noise? Long Shijendi coldly said. At this time, sword immortal Tiansun was surprised to find that Long Shijendi was actually in this conference room. Your Majesty Dragon Shi, what are you doing here? Sword immortal Sky Sun asked in disbelief. Aren't you supposed to arrive tomorrow? I heard that Shanhai Pass is in danger, so I deliberately sped up my journey and directly used the Void Gate to come to Yangjing City. I want to meet these young talents who are about to go to Shanhai Pass and say a few words of encouragement. Can't I do that? Do I still need to consult you, Sword Immortal Heavenly Sun? Long Shijendi's expression was somewhat sullen. I wouldn't dare. Sword Immortal Heavenly Sun had no choice but to bow his head. But after all, this was his territory in Yangjing City, not to mention that Hao Tianjendi was also in Yangjing City. Therefore, Sword Immortal Heavenly Sun was not inferior to Long Shijendi in nature. He raised his head and asked Long Shijendi with bright and piercing eyes, "It is naturally not a problem for your Majesty to encourage these young heroes, but dare I ask your Majesty, what if there is a murderer among these young heroes?" Murderer? What murder? Is there a murderer among them? Long Shijendi didn't know anything. Of course there is. He is not only a murderer, but also a murderer who killed a sword-bearer, and also killed our Yangjing City. Enough. I know about this matter, and I don't need you to remind me. Long Shijendi rudely interrupted Sword Immortal Heavenly Sun's words. I am clear about this matter. He is not the murderer. On the contrary, he was seriously wounded by Sword Immortal Tian Hen at the first moment, and during the whole process, he didn't even touch Tian Hen. How could he have killed the person? Sword Immortal Heavenly Sun, it is best to think carefully before using the word murderer. Sword Immortal Heavenly Sun choked for a moment. In fact, in his heart, how could he not understand that Ku Rokin was just an unlucky bastard that Yangjing City used to vent its anger? At best, Ku Rokin's crimes were jailbreak and robbery. The hat of a murderer could not be placed on Ku Rokin's head. However, Sword Immortal Heavenly Sun didn't want to admit it just like that. He could only continue, Your Majesty, your words are incorrect. If it weren't for that Ku Rokin bringing Yuan Ku into Yangjing City, how could Yuan Ku have killed Sword Immortal Tian Hen? Although it wasn't Ku Rokin himself who did it, that Yuan Ku was brought in by Ku Rokin. Ku Rokin is the main culprit of this matter, and he is undoubtedly the murderer. Sword Immortal Heavenly Sun's words were not unreasonable. It was like raising a dog. Now that this dog had bitten someone, would it be you or the dog that had to pay for it? Of course it would be you. Otherwise, you would be worse than a dog. Sword Immortal Tian Hen's death was still under the control of the Spirit Sword Grade and above sword-bearers. Therefore, most of the famed sword grade sword-bearers present had no idea what had happened. As the conversation between Sword Immortal Heavenly Sun and Long Shijendi gradually deepened, the other famed sword grade sword-bearers gradually understood what had happened. Then, expressions of horror appeared on their faces. What? Sword Immortal Tian Hen is dead. What? Sword Immortal Tian Hen was killed by Yuan Ku, who was brought in by Ku Rokin? Apart from the dozen or so geniuses who had participated in the Octagon tournament, most of the famed sword-grade swordbearers present were from Yangjing City. After all, the practitioner's time limit was only 2 hours. Apart from the famed sword-grade swordbearers in Yangjing City, the sword spirit of Gui Palace couldn't summon famed sword-grade swordbearers from other cities. Therefore, when the famed sword-grade swordbearers present heard this shocking news, they couldn't help but become restless. Some of them even began to pull out their swords and look around the conference room with vicious eyes, trying to find the famed sword-grade swordbearer called Ku Rokin who was currently in the conference room. Sword Immortal Heavenly Sun, what's going on? Could it be that the Yangjing City swordbearers want to compete with me in swordsmanship? Longsha Jendi saw this scene and immediately seized the opportunity to pressure Sword Immortal Heavenly Sunday. How dare you? How dare you show your swords in front of His Majesty? Put away your swords. Sword Immortal Heavenly Sun didn't hesitate and immediately vented his anger on these famed sword-grade swordbearers who couldn't see the situation clearly. Under his scolding, these famed sword-grade swordbearers could only reluctantly put their swords back into their scabbards. Your Majesty, Heavenly Sun, dare I ask, do you really not care about the face of the tens of thousands of swordbearers in our Yangjing City and want to forcibly shield such a murderer? Sword Immortal Heavenly Sun asked. I am not shielding him. On the contrary, I am doing this for your Yangjing City. Longsha Jendi coldly snorted. Shanghai Pass is in a critical situation and urgently needs a large number of genius-famed sword-grade swordbearers. That Ku Rokin was able to become a famed sword-grade swordbearer within a year, synchronized with the King of Yu's Gojian sword, and is also the direct descendant of Sword Immortal White Colt. I am not unconditionally exonerating or shielding him. I have already issued an imperial decree that it is enough for others to fight in Shanghai Pass for 3 years, but he, Ku Rokin, must fight in Shanghai Pass for a full 30 years. If he does not die within 30 years, then I will pardon his sins and let him come out with a clean record. Longsha Jendi let out a long sigh, but this is 30 years. Not to mention that the probability of him surviving within these 30 years is less than 5%, this is the most glorious 30 years of his life. For him to waste it in this hopeless situation of Shanghai Pass is already the greatest punishment. Is this not enough? Actually, I want to give Shanghai Pass a chance, give Yangjing City a chance, give this kid a chance, and at the same time give Sword Immortal White Colt, who sacrificed himself for humanity, a chance. Let him atone for his crimes in Shanghai Pass. Even if he dies, he should die on the battlefield against Yuan Ku, rather than wasting our human bullets. I remember that when you were young, Sword Immortal Heavenly Sun, you and Sword Immortal White Colt were teammates for a few years, and were even sworn brothers. Could it be that you are going to helplessly watch Sword Immortal White Colt's last bloodline be severed? These 2 paragraphs of Longsha Jendi's previous tough style were replaced with a touch of gentleness. Just as Longsha Jendi had said, fighting in Shanghai Pass for 30 years was indeed more painful than death. From a purely criminal point of view, it was no less than a death sentence. In comparison, letting Ku Rokin fight in Shanghai Pass was indeed more practical than simply wasting bullets. In addition, Ku Rokin's father, Ju Wudao, had perished together with the Creator's Godhead for the sake of humanity. He had used his own life to prevent the Creator's Godhead from exploding, thus saving the lives of 3,000 Yuzhang City's elite swordbearers. With such a meritorious deed bestowed upon Ku Rokin, no matter how one looked at it, his punishment should be reduced. But Tian Hen was also a hero of our Yangjing City, yet he was killed by Yuan Ku for no reason at all. If we let Ku Rokin off just like that, Tian Hen's spirit in heaven. It was clear that Sword Immortal Heavenly Sun still didn't want to let Ku Rokin off just like that. Senior Heavenly Sun, I hope you can watch this video about this matter. The sword spirit of Gui Hall, who had been silent all this while, suddenly spoke. Then, everyone heard a crisp sound from Sword Immortal Heavenly Sun's personal terminal. I've sent the video to you. I think this video will clearly prove who killed Sword Immortal Tian Hen. Sword Immortal Heavenly Sun closed his eyes. Clearly, he was directly using his brain to read the video on his personal terminal. About 2 to 3 minutes later, the video finished playing, and Sword Immortal Heavenly Sun opened his eyes again. However, This time, Sword Immortal Heavenly Sun's eyes were no longer filled with anger. Instead, there was a hint of doubt. That's impossible. Tian Hen's immortal grade sword mistress has already fallen into a deep slumber. How could she appear in the video and describe what happened during the battle? It turned out that Sword Immortal Heavenly Sun was watching a video of Sword Immortal Tian Hen's immortal grade sword mistress. In the video, Sword Immortal Tian Hen's sword mistress very clearly described how Sword Immortal Tian Hen had fought Zhu Luren, how he had defeated Sho Sho, and the fact that if he had tried to devour Sho Sho's divinity, he would have died to the divinity. This was because Sword Immortal Tian Hen would never lie about something as important as this. Therefore, if this was really what Sword Immortal Tian Hen's immortal grade sword mistress had said, then it could be confirmed that this was the truth. However, the problem was that Sword Immortal Tian Hen was already dead, and all of his sword mistresses had fallen into a deep slumber. How could this video have been recorded? Chapter 842. Senior Sky Sun. This video definitely has something to do with me. The Saintess of Jerusalem, Ashma, who had been sitting among the sword-bearers without saying a word, stood up and said, "There is someone that Ashma can't refuse. He wants me to do him a small favor by using my ancient sword maiden sword to summon a sword maiden in her previous state." After hearing Ashma's explanation, Sword Immortal Sky Sun finally understood. It turned out that the sword maiden in the video wasn't the real sword maiden. Instead, it was the sword maiden that Ashima had summoned using her ancient sword maiden sword maiden. It was the sword maiden that had experienced the entire battle a few days ago. Therefore, even though the real sword maiden of Sword Immortal Tian Hen was still asleep in the sword tower, Ashma could still appear in front of the camera to record the video and tell the truth. At the same time, because this sword maiden was summoned by the sword maiden, the possibility of her lying was directly reduced to zero. This was because the sword maiden summoned by the sword maiden basically had zero EQ. Even if you ordered her to lie, she would not speak. She would only tell the truth about her memories. Therefore, the sword maiden in the video was definitely telling the truth. There was no way she could fake it. No wonder the staff of the sword tower told me 3 days ago that a sword-bearer from Cold City had entered the sword tower, but left without doing anything. So it was you, Ashma, who entered the sword tower to see Sword Immortal Tian Hen's sword maiden so that you could use the sword maiden to summon her past life. Wu Zhang Shifang added. If the sword maiden wanted to summon the past life of the sword maiden, she had to see her real body with her own eyes. Therefore, Ashma had to make a trip to the sword tower. Wu Zhang Shifang's words also indirectly proved the truth of this matter. I'm very curious. Who is so important that the Saintess of Jerusalem personally came to save such a person? Sword Immortal Sky Sun asked Ashma with a gloomy expression. I'm sorry, Senior Sky Sun, I can't tell you the answer. Ashma shook her head through the veil and sat back down. I know even if you don't tell me. Sword Immortal Sky Sun glanced at Longsha Jendi and the sword spirit of the Gui Hall. Obviously, he believed that these two were the mysterious people who had asked Ashma to help. Because only these two people had the face to ask the Holy Maiden of Jerusalem to help them hide their identities. If that's the case, then Yangjing City has nothing to say. Although Sword Immortal Tian Hen's death had a lot to do with Ku Rokin, since he was willing to fight for 30 years in Shanhai Pass to atone for his crimes, then Yangjing City is not willing to waste this bullet. With that, Sword Immortal Sky Sun left in a hurry with his men. As for Ku Rokin, who had always been a topic of conversation between the two of them, he had never appeared, and no one knew where he was. Father, why did you speak up for Ku Rokin today? Why did you ask me to send people from the Shanhai Pass Dispatching Bureau to forcefully take Ku Rokin away in your name? Why did you do that? After all the sword-bearers had left the conference room, the sword spirit of Gui Palace, who had been cooperating with Longsha Jendi, suddenly asked. It seemed that the sword spirit of Gui Palace had received orders from Longsha Jendi not long ago to take Ku Rokin away. Little White. Longsha Jendi let out a long sigh. Then, he gently stroked the head of the sword spirit of Gui Palace with his big hands. When the sword spirit heard the words Little White, he couldn't help but tremble. Obviously, he hated this name. Little White. What do you think of your father as a person? What's wrong with being Jendi? Longsha Jendi asked. Bad-tempered, selfish, moody, mean and ungrateful. The sword spirit of Gui Palace bluntly pointed out Longsha Jendi's shortcomings, causing Longsha Jendi's face to be filled with embarrassment. Enough. How can you talk about your father like that? Longsha Jendi forcibly interrupted the sword spirit of Gui Palace and then sighed with emotion. But what you said is also the truth. Because of my temperament, your father isn't good in the hearts of others. They don't like me, and some even hate me. Although you have belittled your father and made me worthless, how can your temperament be good? At that time, I strongly opposed you entering the Shanghai Pass Dispatching Bureau, but you insisted on squeezing your way in. In the past 3 years, you have almost offended all the talented youths of the younger generation. Among these talented youths, there are bound to be future sword immortals and Jendi. What do you think your future will be like? Longsha Jendi silently spoke while the sword spirit of Gui Palace silently listened. At this time, the two of them looked like a pair of father and son. I'm not young anymore. It might be 30 years, or 20 years. I will eventually ascend. But at that time, you will still be young, and the descendants of our family will be even younger. If those future sword immortals and Jendi have the intention to retaliate against you, what do you think will happen to you? At that time, I will also be a sword immortal, Jendi. I don't need to be afraid of them, the sword spirit of Gui Palace coldly responded. No, you can't become a sword immortal, and you can't become a Jendi. All of this has already been predestined. You know this better than me. As Longsha Jendi said this, his whole person showed a kind of miserable feeling. From the time you were 3 years old, I knew that you were destined to be a spirit sword level swordsman. Humph, that's not what you said at that time. You told me that I was destined to be a famous sword level swordsman for my whole life. However, didn't I still use my own strength to become a spirit sword level swordsman? Why do you think that I can't become a sword immortal? Why do you say that I can't ascend the throne and become an emperor? The sword spirit of Gui Palace's emotions suddenly erupted as he loudly questioned Longsha Jendi. Did you really rely on your own strength? Longsha Jendi strangely glared at the sword spirit of Gui Palace. The sword spirit of Gui Palace avoided Longsha Jendi's eyes with a guilty expression that he had never shown before. You are playing with fire, Wuzhong Shifang is also playing with fire, and some people are also playing with fire. I don't know whether the fire will burn me or not, but I know that if the fire really burns you, without Jendi's help, you will undoubtedly die, just like that arrogant Tian Hen. Our family will also end up like the heaven-shrouding family because of people like you. The dignified heaven-shrouding Jendi's descendant actually ended up worse than a dog, living like an animal. But the heaven-shrouding family can at least live like animals, but whether our Longsha family can still exist in this world is still a problem. Even if I die without a corpse, I still have to do this. The sword spirit stubbornly straightened his back. Dying is better than being a dog. Then go ahead and do it. Otherwise, why do you think I did this when I clearly saw through all your plans and even pushed Anna into the fire pit? Now, I don't even know if she's dead or alive. Longsha Jendi patted the shoulder of the sword spirit of Gui Palace. Don't worry and do it. I have already asked for a favor from you. A future Jendi has already promised me that no matter what kind of crime you commit, he will protect your life. At the very least, he will protect our family's bloodline. So don't worry and do it. I have already paved the way for you. Dad, are you crazy? Even that lunatic Wuzhong Shifang doesn't dare to say that he can ascend to the throne in the future. How can you say that you will get a favor from a future Jendi? The sword spirit of Gui Palace asked in confusion. You don't have to worry about this. Dad said that the future Jendi is the future Jendi. In fact, Dad is also looking forward to it. If you really succeed, then our Longsha family will be immortal. Then Dad, why don't you join us? The sword spirit of Gui Palace looked at his father. If you are willing to join us, then our plan will be even more guaranteed. I can't join you. Longsha Jendi shook his head. I am Jendi, the last pillar of humanity. I will never join a plan that uses the future of humanity as an experiment. Don't forget that the Lionian family is secretly controlling everything. I even suspect that your plan has been completely grasped by the Lionian family. What? We are obviously very secretive. It is impossible for the Lionian family to know. For the first time, the sword spirit of Gui Palace showed an expression of fear. It was as if the Lionian family represented a terrifying monster. Didn't you also hide it from me? But didn't I know everything about your plan? Long Jendi smiled. Even I can understand your plan, let alone the Lionian family that has been operating in this world for 1,000 years. Don't think that you can hide anything from them. You are just burying your head in the sand. Then what should we do? The sword spirit of Gui Palace started trembling in fear. If the Lionian family tries to stop us, then I'm afraid we will all. What are you worried about? If the Lionian family really wanted to stop you, they would have done it long ago. Why would they wait until now? You have already completed half of your plan. Jendi rubbed his son's head. Don't worry. The Lionian family is also looking forward to change. Perhaps they are disgusted with the 1,000 years of stagnation. They also want to know if humans can truly be freed after your plan succeeds. They want to be freed from the 1,000 years of endless battles and return to the happy era of exams and work. When Guhan and the others came out of the White Jade Jing of the Sword Committee headquarters, there was already a large maglev bus waiting in the parking lot of the White Jade Jing. This bus was obviously prepared for Guhan and the other famous sword-bearers. After leaving the White Jade Jing, they boarded the bus and went straight to Shanhai Pass. They did not even stop for a moment. This bus seemed to be similar to the Eagle Cat Sword Spirit's bus. There were individual doors in the bus, and each door led to an individual room. However, it was different from the Eagle Cat Sword Spirit's maglev bus that Guhan had taken before. The Eagle Cat Sword Spirit's bus was similar to an RV modified. There were no changes in the space. However, these two buses had a space-folding system, just like Guhan's droplet flying car. It looked like a small door, but when it opened, it revealed a large room that was about 30 square meters. There were 25 such large rooms in the 20-meter-long maglev bus. Thank you. When Guhan opened the room with his name written on it, he saw a shiny bald head in front of him. Chapter 843. In Ji Yuhan's memory, this should be the first time in history that Zhu Luren bowed to him to express his gratitude. At least, this arrogant teenager was not stupid. He knew who had secretly helped him out of the prison where he would surely die. Don't thank me so quickly. Wait until you walk out of Shanhai Pass alive in 30 years. Guhan waved his hand and looked at Ku Rokin's bald head. What happened to your hair? Could it be those guys from Yangjing City? No. I just shaved it off myself. Ku Rokin touched his bald head subconsciously. I will grow my hair again when I meet my shosho again. Boring. Guhan said and sat on a bed with his name written on it. Guhan noticed that there were a total of 4 beds in this room. It seemed like 4 people would be sleeping in this room tonight. In addition to Ju Elvrin, who was already here, 2 more people would join this room. Soon, Guhan knew who they were. Harry Chang Ruo and Andreevich walked in side by side. It seemed like they were Guhan's temporary roommates tonight. Sir Guhan. Harry Chang Ruo jumped up in surprise when he saw Guhan in the room. He wanted to get intimate with Guhan but was stopped by Guhan. Your bed is over there. Guhan said calmly. Wait, why are there 5 people in this room? Andreevich, who had never spoken to Ji Yuhan, looked around the room and was surprised to find that there was a 5th person in the room where there should only be 4 people. The 5th person was naturally none other than the extra Ji Xuanwu. My cousin joined us temporarily, so the sword spirit didn't arrange a room for her. She could only stay with me. Guhan's words seemed reasonable, but in fact, the sword spirit had sent a message to Guhan to inform Guhan that the sword spirit had arranged a room for Ji Xuanwu in Lionian Ling's room. However, how could Guhan let Ji Xuanwu stay in another room? Who knew if this girl, who knew little about the human world, would say something strange to Lionian Ling and expose Guhan's secret? However, since Ji Xuanwu had appeared in front of everyone as a human, Guhan couldn't force her into his dimensional pocket. In the end, Guhan had no choice but to let Jiyu Xuanwu lie on the same bed as him and use this method to control Jiyu Xuanwu's big mouth. As Guhan's words made sense, Andreevich didn't question it anymore. If Guhan observed Andreevich's eyes carefully, he would realize that there was something wrong with them. He looked at Jiyu Xuanwu as though there was a burning flame hidden in his eyes. Especially when he saw Guhan forcefully hugging Jiyu Xuanwu and lying on the same bed, his eyes looked like they were about to spit fire. Andreevich even clenched his fists, as though he was going to punch Guhan at any time. Of course, Andreevich held back in the end. After all, they were cousins. It was none of his business that they were sleeping on the same bed. Damn you! Do you really think you are my father? Who wants to sleep on the same bed with a pervert like you? The bed was a single bed. It was more spacious when one person was lying on it, but it was more compact when two people were lying on it. More importantly, Jiyu Xuanwu's behavior was very dishonest. He constantly struggled and wanted to leave Guhan's side. If you want me to see your mother, then you should obediently sleep. If something goes wrong, I won't take any responsibility. Guhan's words made Jiyu Xuanwu suddenly become a lot more honest. He didn't struggle anymore, but from time to time, he would use his 2 fingers to pinch Guhan's flesh. Unfortunately, no matter how hard Jiyu Xuanwu tried, Guhan always had a calm expression, as if Jiyu Xuanwu was not pinching his own flesh. Mph, I'm warning you, you are absolutely not allowed to touch me. Otherwise, Bai Tai will ruthlessly stab you with his sword. Do you understand? Jiyu Xuanwu fiercely threatened. Qingpin, come out for a moment. It wasn't a good idea to let Jiyu Xuanwu toss and turn like this, so Guhan brought out the versatile Qingpin. Ever since Qingpin drank a cup of snake bile from the 3-foot sword and fainted, he hadn't recovered from the dizziness. Therefore, in the following battle, Qingpin was very quiet and didn't come out to cause trouble. Instead, he obediently stayed in the scabbard and slept. Therefore, when Guhan once again pulled out Qingpin from the scabbard, Qingpin was still drooling as he slept, but his eyebrows and nose were still wrinkled. Obviously, he was still savoring the delicious golden prajna snake bile. This is the Qingpin sword. Guhan placed Qingpin in between him and Jiyu Xuanwu. With Qingpin between us, you don't have to worry about me plotting against you. It seemed like Guhan was using Qingpin as a human isolator. However, this was indeed a good idea, because among all of Guhan's sword ladies, Jiyu Xuanwu was the least against Qingpin. She was also willing to sleep with Qingpin. Sure enough, when Jiyu Xuanwu saw Qingpin, this person quieted down a lot. He no longer licked Guhan's flesh, but buried his face deep into Qingpin's body, reveling in the milky fragrance on Qingpin's body. Hey! Are you asleep? Guhan had just closed his eyes when he heard Jiyu Xuanwu ask him this question. Ask what you want to ask, Guhan said. I'm a little scared. Jiyu Xuanwu, who was originally lively, suddenly became a little depressed. I've been out for almost a month. I don't know if my mother is doing well in the amusement park. I secretly escaped without her knowing. Will she drag her seriously ill body to look for me? There was a saying that went, the closer you are to home, the more timid you are. They were about to go home, and Jiyu Xuanwu suddenly began to be afraid. Maybe not. Guhan said faintly. Go to sleep. No matter what, you have to face it. When you go home, you will know what will happen. Although they were on a floating bus, and the 3 of them were squeezed on a bed, Guhan slept surprisingly comfortably. It was not until he suddenly heard a shrill chirping sound in his ears that Guhan woke up from his sleep. Guhan, wake up. We have arrived at Shanghai Pass. Harry Chang Ruo said to Guhan. Are you nervous? Guhan looked at Harry Chang Ruo. No. How do you see me nervous? I'm not nervous at all. Harry Chang Ruo's voice was a little intermittent. Then you should pay attention to your own buttons. Guhan pointed at Harry Chang Ruo's clothes. Only then did Harry Chang Ruo realize that the bottom button of his clothes was on the 3rd buttonhole, and then it was all buttoned up in a mess. The clothes looked very awkward on his body. I'm sorry. Harry Chang Ruo's face turned red, and then ran back to his bed like a little girl and began to put on his clothes again. Guhan also patted Qingpin's little face, and found that this cute girl who had slept for almost 24 hours still had no intention of waking up. He simply stopped waking her and put her back into the scabbard. Jiyu Xuanwu was nowhere to be found, and when Guhan opened his eyes, he did not see the girl's shadow. Come, come, come. Time to eat. Just as Guhan was about to look for Jiyu Xuanwu, the girl opened the door and walked in with a big plate of steamed buns. Andreevich followed behind Jiyu Xuanwu. This kid laughed happily, and in his hand was a big pot of steamed porridge. Hee hee. Everyone, it's time to eat. I specially went to prepare this for everyone. It turned out that Jiyu Xuanwu had actually gone to get breakfast. Because they came out in a hurry, most of the sword-bearers did not prepare a lot of food in their dimensional pockets like they usually did when they went out. Therefore, the Gui Palace Sword Spirit was in charge of breakfast. As for lunch and dinner in the future, the Shanghai Pass Management Committee would be responsible for it, so Guhan and the other sword-bearers did not need to worry about food. Come, my good brother, this is for you. Jiyu Xuanwu brought 3 big steamed buns to Guhan, and Andreevich also filled a bowl with porridge and brought it to Guhan. When did these two get together? One was holding the steamed buns, and the other was delivering porridge. Guhan thought silently. All of a sudden, the number of people in the room had tripled, because all the sword-bearers had released their sword ladies. After all, sword ladies also needed to eat. The bus has entered the Ju Tian Star Formation. All sword-bearers, please get ready and pack your belongings. Get off the bus in an orderly manner and head to the Shanghai Pass Tower to await the Shanghai Pass Management Committee's battle allocation. The voice of the Gui Palace Sword Spirit was heard from the bus's broadcast. Guhan conveniently threw the remaining steamed buns into his dimensional pocket and distributed them to the sword ladies in his pocket. Because Guhan could not release all 6 of his sword ladies, he still had 3 sword ladies who had not eaten yet. Therefore, Guhan could only rely on this little trick to deliver food to the sword ladies. It seemed like it was a little tragic to be Guhan's sword lady. Chapter 844. This is the Ju Tian Star Big Battle Formation. After getting off the hover bus and standing on the ground under the sunlight, everyone began to tremble from the bottom of their hearts as they looked at the huge Ju Tian Star Big Battle Formation in front of them. This Ju Tian Star Big Battle Formation was simply too spectacular. Looking at the Ju Tian Star Big Battle Formation from the outside, it felt like a huge black iron pot had been placed upside down on the ground, covering the entire northeast region. Inside the iron pot, countless stars could be seen shining, as if the entire starry sky had been put into the iron pot. At the outermost edge of the iron pot, there was a huge city wall that stretched as far as the eye could see. Whether it was in terms of height or length, this city wall seemed to have surpassed the strength of the outermost city wall of Yangjing City. This city wall only had a city gate in front of the hover bus, and the huge words Shanghai Pass were engraved on the city wall. Looking up from the city wall, one could see the starry sky inside the iron pot, as well as the stars that filled the sky. There were many stars in the iron pot, but the most eye-catching and brightest stars were the 2 stars that were located at the eyes of the Tai Chi Yin and Yang diagram of the iron pot. One of the stars was shining with a red light, while the other one was shining with a bluish-yellow light. These 2 stars were the eyes of the Ju Tian Star Big Battle Formation, the Tai Yin Star and the Tai Yang Star, which were the sun and the moon in the traditional sense. The Tai Yang Star and the Tai Yin Star were the absolute eyes of the Ju Tian Star Big Battle Formation, and they were also the key to suppressing the entire formation. Once either of these 2 stars was broken, the entire Ju Tian Star Big Battle Formation would instantly disappear, and the 12 Zhu Wu and the Wu people, who had been suppressed by humans for hundreds of years, would also spurt out and launch the most deadly revenge on humans. Now, Wu people were besieging the sun. Guhan could vaguely see some tiny lights that were only about a pixel shining around the sun. This did not seem like a big deal, but Guhan knew that every flash of light represented an intense battle that was going on. The battle on the sun had probably reached its climax. Inside the Ju Tian Star Battle Formation, other than the extreme Yang Star and the extreme Yin Star, there were 7 other stars that were only slightly brighter than the extreme Yang Star and the extreme Yin Star. They represented the Myrtle Imperial Star, the Tai Wei Imperial Star, the Tianxia Imperial Star, the azure dragon in the east, the vermilion bird in the south, the baihu in the west, and the black tortoise in the north. In addition to these 7 stars, there were 365 stars the size of jelly beans. According to their brightness, they belonged to the 3rd level of the Ju-Tien star battle formation. This was the guest star of the Ju-Tien star battle formation. Finally, there were the most numerous tiny stars in the Ju-Tien star battle formation. They were also called microstars. This was the most fundamental power of the Ju-Tien star battle formation. It represented 14,800 mini Ju-Tien star banners and 14,800 ancient sword bearers. Speaking of these ancient sword bearers, it was said that the sword spirit of the Gui Hall had temporarily gathered 3,000 ancient sword bearers in Yangjing City. The 7 main stars controlled 365 guest stars and 14,800 microstars. They were the backbone of the Ju-Tien star battle formation. If more than 3 of the 7 main stars were lost, it would mean that the heavenly cycle star formation would be destroyed in an instant. Alright, you can personally experience the existence of these stars later. However, you must immediately enter the Ju-Tien star battle formation and join the battle to defend the sun. The sword spirit of Gui Palace, who was the last to get off the carriage, said to all the reinforcements. Then, the sword spirit of Black Shop gestured at the heavenly cycle star formation. Suddenly, a small door opened beside the pitch-black city gate of Shanhai Pass. Enter the Ju-Tien star battle formation through this small door. There will be people from the Shanhai Pass Management Committee who will be in charge of assigning tasks to you. After saying this, the sword spirit of the Gui Hall jumped back onto the hover bus. Then, the hover bus drove back to Yangjing City without looking back. What's going on? He just left us here and left by himself, a middle-aged sword bearer said with a dissatisfied expression. He had been holding back his anger towards the sword spirit of Gui Hall, who had led him to his death. However, he didn't expect the sword spirit to leave after bringing them to the gate of Shanhai Pass. Was he that afraid of death? Don't talk nonsense if you don't know anything. Liuyan Ling said coldly. In order to maintain the stability of the Ju-Tien star battle formation, any sword bearer above the spiritual sword level is not allowed to enter the Ju-Tien star battle formation. Otherwise, their power will destroy the basic structure of the Ju-Tien star battle formation and destroy the Ju-Tien star battle formation. Therefore, it's not that the sword spirit doesn't want to go in with us, but he can't. The sword spirit of the Gui Hall has been fighting in Shanhai Pass for 6 years. Why would he be afraid of this place? Liuyan Ling's words made the middle-aged sword-bearer speechless. He could only smile awkwardly. Moreover, the sword spirit of the Gui Hall has more important things to do. Not only did the famed sword-bearers suffer heavy casualties, but more than 3,000 ancient sword-bearers have also died. Since this morning, Yangjing City has mobilized all of its ancient sword-rank sword-bearers to participate in the battle. Therefore, the sword spirit of Gui Hall must rush back to Yangjing City and bring the ancient sword-rank sword-bearers here tomorrow morning. Liuyan Ling's words made everyone's heart sink. They didn't expect that more than 3,000 ancient sword-bearers had died. Moreover, more ancient sword-bearers would be coming to Shanhai Pass soon. These famed sword-rank sword-bearers were far stronger than ancient sword-rank sword-bearers. Those ancient sword-rank sword-wielders were fearless enough to fight. If they continued to cower, wouldn't they become the biggest joke in the world? Therefore, the aura of the famed sword-bearers instantly increased. Then, under Liuyan Ling's lead, they entered the Shanhai Pass through a small door at the bottom of the city wall. They officially entered the Shanhai Pass, which was considered a hopeless place for the sword-bearers. After entering the Shanhai Pass, Ji Yuhan and the others first passed through a long and narrow passage that did not contain any light. When everything became clear, Ji Yuhan and the others suddenly found themselves in a large hall. This hall was very simple. There were no fancy decorations. There were only a few chairs in the middle of the hall. On both sides of the hall, there were 8 different small doors. Other than the small door that Guhan and the others used to enter the hall, the other 7 doors seemed to be the exit of the hall. They led to different locations and directions. Above these 7 small doors were the words Zi Wei, Tai Wei, Sky City, Green Dragon, Vermilion Bird, Baihu, and Black Tortoise. These 7 doors seemed to represent the 7 main stars of the Ju Tien star formation. Andreevich. Harry Chang Ruo, XXXX. The 17 of you will enter the Green Dragon Gate. There will naturally be people in the Green Dragon Gate who will arrange your tasks for you. A voice came from the hall's broadcast. Andreevich and Harry Chang Ruo seemed to have been assigned together. They looked at each other and then neatly walked toward the door marked with the words Green Dragon. Ashima. Ladia. The 13 of you will enter the Vermilion Bird Gate. Immediately after, Ashima and Ladia were assigned to the main star of the Vermilion Bird Gate. Guhan. Leslie Dracula. Ku Rokin. The 20 of you will enter the Tai Wei Gate. Next, the mysterious voice assigned Guhan, Leslie Dracula, Ku Rokin, and 17 other people together. Hearing this assignment, Guhan frowned on the spot because Jiyu Xianwu wasn't assigned to the same place as him. This was something that Guhan couldn't accept no matter what. Because if Guhan couldn't be assigned to the same place as Jiyu Xianwu, it meant that Guhan and Jiyu Xianwu would be stationed in different areas. Then how would Guhan be able to enter her house through Jiyu Xianwu? Moreover, if Jiyu Xianwu didn't have Guhan to watch over her, God knows what she would do. Moreover, there were a lot of other troubles, so Guhan had to be assigned to the same place as Jiyu Xianwu. This was Guhan's bottom line. I object. Under everyone's astonished gaze, Guhan only used a clear voice to respond to the person in the broadcast. My cousin must be with me. I refuse to be separated from my cousin. The voice in the broadcast was silent for a while. You must listen to the management of our Shanghai Sea Sword Committee Management Committee. You must abide by our assignment. Now, please enter the Tai Wei Gate immediately. Otherwise, what can you do? What can you do to me? Without waiting for the person to finish, Guhan directly interrupted him. Otherwise, our Shanghai Sea Management Committee will let you know what rules are. The voice in the broadcast was very dignified. But no matter how one listened to this dignified voice, there was a hint of helplessness. It was obvious that the Shanghai Sea Management Committee had not met anyone who dared to disobey their orders for a long time. That's good. Guhan squinted his eyes. Then let me see the rules of your Shanghai Sea Management Committee. I want to see, what exactly are the rules? To be able to make me, Guhan, submit. Ignorant. The voice in the broadcast was still dignified. Your actions are provoking the entire human race. You are provoking the dignity of the Sword Committee. We will immediately inform the Yuzhong City Sword Committee to carry out a severe punishment. If necessary, we will even strip you and your family of all privileges. This was the first punishment that the Shanghai Sea Management Committee had for people who dared to provoke them. It had to be said that this punishment was effective in most situations. This was because after the famous sword bearers entered Shanghai Sea, they were most concerned about the fate of their family and whether they were living well. Therefore, when the Shanghai Sea Management Committee mentioned that they would remove the privileges of the family members of the sword bearers, most of the sword bearers would behave. Unfortunately, the Shanghai Sea Management Committee had met a troublesome guy like Guhan. Chapter 845. What kind of person was Guhan? He had no father or mother. He was a bachelor in Yuzhong City, and he had no family that he cared about. Even if he did, the Shanghai Pass Management Committee would not be able to punish Guhan's family. As long as Liu Lei and Liu Shihua were still the chairman of Yuzhong City's Sword Committee and Sword Pavilion Master, then Guhan would be safe in Yuzhong City and no one would be able to touch his family. Therefore, after Guhan heard the Shanghai Pass Management Committee's words, he did not have any expression of worry on his face and still had an uncooperative attitude. He pulled Jiyu Xuanwu tightly to his side and did not listen to the Shanghai Pass Management Committee's instructions at all as he entered Supreme Sect. How about this? I'll switch places with Jiyu Xuanwu and let Miss Jiyu Xuanwu and Brother Guhan go to Supreme Sect together. Seeing this situation, Ku Rokin took the initiative to help. Logically speaking, Ku Rokin's plan was very good and there would be no problem if they followed it. All they had to do was switch places and all the problems would be solved. However, How could the Shanghai Pass Management Committee agree to Ku Rokin's suggestion? Didn't this mean that the Shanghai Pass Management Committee would give in under the threat of Guhan, this troublemaker? Then how would they manage so many sword bearers in the future? So it's a guy with no parents. No wonder he dares to speak so arrogantly here. The owner of the voice seemed to understand the reason for Guhan's fearlessness, so he said in a very mocking tone. If it was a few months ago, Guhan would definitely rush up to find the guy who dared to insult his parents and fight him. However, the current Guhan was quite indifferent to this and treated it as if this person was just farting. PH, don't think that no one in Shanghai Pass can deal with you. In Guanlo, there are. The voice suddenly stopped mid-sentence. He had wanted to say that there was a team of elite swordbearers stationed at Guanhua to deal with rebellious troublemakers like Guhan. But just as he was about to speak, he remembered that due to the intense battle in Shanghai Pass, all the members of the Discipline Inspection Committee had been sent to the battlefield. The entire building was actually empty, with only a few people maintaining the basic operations of the building. You shameless bastard! How dare you threaten us with such a despicable method when our Shanghai Pass and the entire human race is in danger? I. The owner of the voice could no longer remain calm. He was so angry that his tongue began to curl. You rascal, so what if you and your cousin are separated for a while? You're such a selfish bastard. That's right. I can't stand it anymore. How can this kind of person be a *T young genius of the younger generation? Let me, this old man, teach you how to be a proper person. Exactly. That's right. Don't think that just because the people of the Discipline Inspection Committee aren't here that you can be so arrogant. I was a good member of the Discipline Inspection Committee when I was young. Teaching a brat like you a lesson is like killing a chicken with a butcher's knife. PH, brothers, let's go together. Let's teach this little guy a good lesson and teach him how to be a proper person. Perhaps enraged by Guhan's arrogant attitude, the middle-aged and elderly swordbearers quickly surrounded Guhan and prepared to teach Guhan how to be a proper person. However, different from the middle-aged and elderly swordbearers, the younger generation who knew of Guhan's strength did not act rashly. Instead, they stood where they were and did not plan to join in the attack. Good. As expected, the eyes of the masses are sharp. Even your companions can't bear to watch your evil actions. The voice instantly became full of vigor again. Seniors, please be careful when you attack. Although this person is despicable, he is still a human. After capturing him, just use a talisman to seal the sword essence in his body. Lock him up and do not harm his life. These middle-aged and elderly swordbearers were actually not bad people. Even if the voice did not say anything, they would not really harm Guhan's life. Thus, one of the more prestigious swordbearers said, "Young man, we do not wish to make things difficult for you. Just surrender and wait for the Discipline Inspection Committee's judgment." Guhan did not speak. Instead, he directly pulled out his juicy sword. Everyone here are seniors and the pillars of our human race. Now that we have fallen into a dangerous situation for the sake of the survival of the human race, this junior should not have pulled out his sword against you seniors. However, my cousin must be with this junior. Thus, this junior can only offend you. Since that's the case, little guy, if we use the sword essence to fight here, we will expend too much energy. When the time comes, I'm afraid that the Wu people will benefit from it. Why don't we just fight with pure sword skills and not use any skills? Once someone's personal shield is attacked, that person will voluntarily retreat from the battlefield and admit defeat. What do you think? The senior said. That's great. Of course, Guhan agreed. It was just like what the old man said. If both sides fought seriously and used the sword essence to fight, Guhan would not be able to go all out. Otherwise, these middle-aged and elderly swordbearers would all be severely injured. Then, it would really be the Wu people who would benefit. This kind of pure sword skills competition was the best. In this world, Guhan still did not think that there was any swordbearers whose sword skills could surpass his. Fight! 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 Kill this shameless brat! In the broadcasting room, a little girl shouted. This little girl was at most 11 or 12 years old. She was probably not even a sword-bearer. It was unknown how she appeared in such a crucial place like Shanghai Pass Tower. She was also in charge of the dispatch of the entire Shanghai Pass. Go. Go. Kill this brat. Soon, in the monitor, Guhan and the middle-aged and elderly sword-bearers were fighting. The little girl raised her fist and cheered for the middle-aged and elderly sword-bearers. In the beginning, these middle-aged and elderly sword-bearers were still reserved. Only one of them was a famous sword-level sword mistress. Although there was only one famous sword-level sword mistress, these middle-aged and elderly sword-bearers were still very confident. This was because although this famous sword-level sword mistress did not rank high in the famous sword records, her sword skills were one of the best. It was said that she could be ranked in the top 15 among the famous sword-level sword mistresses. Therefore, in these middle-aged and elderly practitioners' minds, this annoying brat was definitely going to lose. It was a pity that these middle-aged and elderly sword-bearers did not seem to be paying attention to the octagon tournament. Otherwise, they would not have looked down on Guhan's sword skills. In just 3 seconds, the little girl in front of the monitor went silent. This was because the famous sword-level sword mistress's arm had been struck by Guhan's juicy sword. According to the agreement between Guhan and these middle-aged and elderly sword-bearers, this sword mistress had already lost. So you're a sword master. No wonder you're so arrogant. The sword-bearer who was in charge of communicating with Guhan frowned. He could already sense that Guhan was not easy to deal with. Even the famous sword-level sword mistress had lost. Among the other middle-aged and elderly sword-bearers, there was probably no one who could beat him in a one-on-one fight. Of course, there were people who could beat him in a one-on-one fight, such as this middle-aged and elderly sword-bearer. He looked at Liuyan Ling, who was standing in the distance. He was very sure that as long as the successor of the Liuyan family clan was willing to make a move, this arrogant young man would definitely be defeated. It was a pity that Liuyan Ling ignored his gaze. Clearly, she did not want to get involved in Guhan's fight. Old fellows, even if we lose face today, we have to let this little fellow understand the principles of being a human. Helpless, the sword-bearer could only use the tactic of ganging up on Guhan. Hence, under his command, the 4 sword-bearers released their sword mistresses at the same time. Then, the 4 sword mistresses attacked Guhan at the same time. Well done. You should have done this to this bad guy long ago, the little girl said fiercely in the broadcasting room as she raised her fist. In her opinion, although the previous sword mistress had failed, now that there were 4 sword mistresses attacking at the same time, this Guhan was definitely going to lose. However, reality soon gave the little girl a slap in the face. The 2 sides had not even fought for 3 or 4 rounds, and 2 of the sword ladies had already been hit by Jiu Han's close shields. They had to admit defeat according to the rules they had agreed upon. This made the middle-aged and elderly sword-bearers' faces burn. Then, they quickly sent out another 4 sword mistresses, and another 4, 8, 10. In the end, there were a total of 18 sword mistresses attacking Guhan at the same time. Some of the students who were good at math might say, that's not right. Shouldn't 4 plus 4 plus 8 plus 10 be 26? Why are there only 18 sword mistresses attacking Guhan? The reason was simple. This was because while the sword mistresses were attacking Guhan, there were constantly sword mistresses who were hit by their personal shields and took the initiative to retreat from the battle. Hence, when the middle-aged and elderly sword-bearers were all sent out, there were at most 18 of them left. However, when the 18 sword mistresses attacked at the same time, Guhan could not deal with a sword mistress in 2 or 3 moves like he did earlier. This nap lasted for a full 2 or 3 minutes. The 18 sword mistresses constantly attacked Guhan, and Guhan seemed to have lost the ability to attack and could only passively defend. Although he was attacked by 18 sword mistresses at the same time, Guhan's sword momentum was not the slightest bit chaotic. The juicy sword in his hand danced in an airtight manner. Even if the 18 swords attacked him at the same time, Guhan could still block them back. Come on. We're going to win. The little girl's blood was boiling as she watched in front of the monitor. She jumped up and down energetically, constantly waving her fists. It was as if she was also in the battle and her fists could land on Guhan. From what she knew, although Guhan was very arrogant just now, He was now in a situation where he could only defend. And if he kept on defending, it was destined that his defense would be broken one day. Hence, she felt that Guhan was going to lose for sure. However, she did not know that during the process of this battle, Guhan's momentum was accumulating more and more. Finally, when this momentum accumulated to the peak, Guhan completely exploded. Chapter 846. The Chaos Swordsmanship was a swordsmanship that Guhan had created by himself. However, this swordsmanship was not perfect. It was only a half-finished swordsmanship. Therefore, in this swordsmanship showdown, Guhan deliberately used the Chaos Swordsmanship, hoping to use the power and magic of these sword maidens to perfect his own Chaos Swordsmanship. Fortunately, Guhan's plan succeeded. After being polished by these sword maidens, and after a minute of defense and accumulation, Guhan felt as if a string in his head had suddenly exploded. Guhan felt as if a string in his head had suddenly exploded. In an instant, a sword force flashed across his mind, and then this sword force appeared in Guhan's hand. Almost at this moment, the entire hall was filled with specks of cold light from the juicy sword in Guhan's hand. It was so dazzling that it almost made the eyes of the onlookers dizzy. When they finally calmed down, they were shocked to find that the 16 sword maidens had all retreated with dumbfounded expressions. What was more frightening was that these famed sword maidens found that their sword maidens' personal shields had almost lost 6% to 2% of their energy. This seemed to be a very small energy loss, but these famed sword maidens knew very well that the guy named Guhan had not used sword essence from the beginning to the end when he fought their sword maidens. Therefore, this kind of damage was completely caused by the sword itself. This was a very frightening thing, because the damage caused by just using the sword maidens' bodies was almost negligible, just like in the battle between Guhan and the sword maidens at the beginning. Although Guhan had also attacked the sword maidens' personal shields, the energy loss of the sword maidens' personal shields was only about 0.3%, which was almost equivalent to no energy loss at all. However, the 0.3% energy loss was enough to shock the middle-aged and elderly swordsmen. If they were to attack the sword maiden's personal shield with all their might without using their sword essences, they might not even be able to consume 0.1% of the personal shield's energy, let alone 6% to 2% like Guhan did. To these middle-aged and elderly swordsmen, it was as unbelievable as telling them that a bridge made of paper could support the weight of a tank. P.S. In fact, a bridge made of paper could indeed support the weight of a tank. These middle-aged and elderly famed sword maidens were more concerned about the energy loss of their personal shields, but behind them, Liuyan Ling and the other young elites were more concerned about Guhan's last strike, because they did not clearly see the trajectory of the sword and how it was used. Miss Ling, did you see the knack of this last strike? I don't think I saw it clearly. Leslie Dracula whispered in Liuyan Ling's ear. I didn't see it clearly either. Liuyan Ling's answer was very straightforward, and her voice was not soft either, so her answer was clearly heard by the rest of the younger generation. The way they looked at Guhan instantly changed, and there was already a little bit of awe in their eyes. This is the real Chaos Heaven Splitter. On the other side of the hall, Jiyu Xianwu was also stunned. She knew this strike. She knew the name of this strike was Chaos Heaven Splitter. She even knew how to use this strike and how to use each step after breaking it down. This was because this was one of the most powerful strikes in the Chaos Sword art. Jiyu Xianwu spent a total of 3 years to master this strike. After mastering it, she once asked her mother about how she was using it, and whether she had reached the point where she surpassed her father. However, after letting out a long sigh, her mother told her that she had only touched the surface of the sword, not to mention surpassing the master. It was worlds apart from her father's primal chaos heaven-splitting sword. The difference was like the difference between heaven and earth, like the difference between heaven and earth. Jiyu Xuanwu naturally did not believe his mother's words. It was only until now, when he saw Jiyu Han use the primal chaos split the heavens with his own eyes, that he finally understood that what he knew was indeed only the tip of the iceberg. It was not on the same level as the primal chaos split the heavens that Jiyu Han used. This doesn't count. He's acting shamelessly. He must have used the sword essence. Everyone, don't be fooled by him. Let's teach this stinking brat a lesson together. In the broadcast, the voice kept urging, and you guys, do you really deserve to be called young elites? Why don't you make a move when you see a person who tramples on the rules of mankind? Could it be that you're in cahoots with him, and want to wallow in the mire with him? Who else wants to give it a try? Guhan took a deep breath and calmed the surging blood in his meridians. This was the first time Guhan had used this strike, and Guhan himself felt very good. He wanted to find an opponent to fight and vent his surging blood. Unfortunately, after seeing Guhan's abnormal chaos heaven splitter, no one dared to make a move. What a joke! Who would be interested in fighting with this abnormal person? So even though the voice in the broadcast kept urging, no one paid attention to it. The scene was so awkward that one could hear a pin drop. There's a descendant of the Liu Nian clan here. Are you just going to watch this person continue to be arrogant? As the judge of humans, the defender of justice, where has your persistence gone? Hurry up and teach this stinking brat a lesson. Ayo! The little girl started to target Liuyan Ling, trying to provoke Liuyan Ling into making a move. But before she could finish, she seemed to be interrupted by something. At the same time, in the broadcast room, the little girl was listening to someone's reprimand with her head lowered. Wei Tian, what are you doing? Why haven't the reinforcements I asked for arrived yet? A manic voice exploded in the little girl's head through the personal terminal, causing Wei Tian to feel dizzy and disoriented. Dad, this has nothing to do with me. It's that guy called Guhan. He didn't listen to my commands, he insisted. Wei Tian explained, feeling wronged. I don't care. I'll give you another 10 minutes. If my reinforcements don't arrive in 10 minutes, you'll have to wait to collect your father's corpse. With a snap, Wei Tian's father hung up the phone, leaving Wei Tian with a mournful look on her face. That bastard. Why aren't you taking your sister and scram to the Tai Wei sect? The rest of you, go to Z Wei sect. Woo 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 woo, don't worry about me, let me cry for a while. After Wei Tian finished speaking to the broadcast, she began to cry. And when she said this, because Wei Tian's hand accidentally hit a button, it turned off a certain switch. Therefore, when this sentence spread out, it was no longer the vigorous and thick male voice from before, but the voice of an authentic little girl. It turned out that Wei Tian had been using a voice changer to speak. At the same time, because Wei Tian didn't plan to turn off the broadcast, the people in the hall were immersed in the pitiful cry of a little girl. So, although the remaining people didn't dare to make a move against Guhan, they all looked at Guhan with disdain, as if blaming Guhan for making a little girl cry. Guhan's face also turned cold. Then, with a rare silence, Jiyu Xuanwu took the lead and entered the Tai Wei sect. You've finally come in, I'm about to die of anxiety waiting here. After Guhan and the 20 famed sword-rank sword-bearers who were assigned to the Tai Wei sect entered the Tai Wei sect, they found that the inside of the sect was also a tunnel. However, this tunnel was far longer than the tunnel at the entrance. When Guhan walked out of the tunnel, he found that he seemed to have entered the interior of a vehicle, and inside, there was already a man who was covered in injuries waiting for him. He said to Guhan, "This is a star shuttle?" Guhan observed the interior of this vehicle and came to this conclusion. Yes, this is a star shuttle, a vehicle that can only be used in the Ju Tian star battle formation. The man with injuries said, and at this time, the last sword-bearer also entered the star shuttle. So, the man pressed a button next to him, and the door of the star shuttle slowly closed. Then, the entire star shuttle flew out at an extremely fast speed. Guhan had long heard of the famous star shuttle. The star shuttle's flying speed was extremely fast. It was said that it could reach a terrifying speed of 5,000 kilometers per hour. At this speed, it would only take half an hour to travel between Yuzhong City and Yangjing City. However, ever since the sky was blocked by Yuanku, humans could no longer use any flying tools. Only in the Ju Tian star battle formation could one use the power of the stars to fly in the sky. Cough cough. Good morning, comrades. My name is Lu Yuanjie, the former guardian of the 9 sections star small Ju Tian star flag. Now, I'm just an old driver responsible for driving the star shuttle. The old driver named Lu Yuanjie took the initiative to introduce himself, There are still 10 minutes before the decisive battle. In these 10 minutes, I will tell you the basic situation in the Ju Tian star battle formation. At the same time, I will tell you what to do, how to quickly join the battle, and how to better protect your own lives. Chapter 847. First, the current battle situation. Lu Yuanjie began to explain. Everyone present, including Gu Han, didn't interrupt him. Lu Yuanjie's words were very important. Every word could be related to their lives, so Gu Han and the others couldn't miss a single word. The Wu people launched a surprise attack on the Ju Tian star formation's Sun star formation at 5 p.m. yesterday. However, because Lady Lilith discovered the Wu people's plot in time, she repelled the Wu people's first wave of attack and successfully protected the Sun star formation. However, the despicable Wu people didn't just launch a sneak attack on the Sun star formation. They also attacked Lady Mu Yang, who was in charge of guarding the Myrtle Imperial Star, Lady Shi Guang, Green Dragon Imperial Star, and Lady Hong Yu of the Vermilion Bird Imperial Star. Lady Mu Yang unfortunately died in the sneak attack. Lady Shi Guang was seriously injured and was protected by Lady Lilith in the Sun Star. Lady Shi Guang and Lady Hong Yu also successfully repelled the sneak attack and protected the two Ju Tian star formation banners. However, the two Ju Tian star banners of the Myrtle Imperial Star and Taiwei Imperial Star have been completely destroyed. In order to completely destroy the Ju Tian star formation, the Wu people began to use all their strength to attack the various areas under the control of the Sun Star. The 12 tribes of the Wu people have all been mobilized. Since 4 p.m. yesterday, all of us have been fighting day and night for a whole 18 hours. Because we suffered heavy losses in the attack a month ago, and we didn't have any reinforcements, we have been miserably suppressed by the Wu people. Our comrades are constantly sacrificed, and the area under our control is getting smaller and smaller. Fortunately, the Wu people also suffered heavy losses in that battle. They can no longer launch fatal attacks on us, so the entire situation has become a situation of mutual attrition. Whichever side's forces disappear first, that side will be declared defeated. However, because the Wu people should be using the power of Zhu Wu's blood to recover, as long as they don't die on the spot, they can enter Zhu Wu's blood to recover. Also, Zhu Wu's blood can continuously create new Wu people, so their forces can continuously join in. In comparison, because we humans don't have reinforcements, we lose one sword bearer every time we die. We can't continue to fight the Wu people. According to Lady Lilith's estimation, the massive heavenly cycle stellar formation will be breached at noon today at the earliest, which is 3 hours later. When that happens, we humans will face a catastrophe. Now, besides the Sun Star Formation the formation, the Ju Tian Star, and the Ju Tian Imperial Star have been broken through. Only the Azure Dragon and Imperial Star and Taiwei Star are. On the other hand, the Sorcerer race's main target was the Vermilion Bird Imperial Star. When I left the battlefield, there were less than 300 minor Heavenly Cycle Star banners left in the Vermilion Bird Imperial Star. The number of minor Heavenly Cycle Star banners was continuously decreasing, and I estimated that there were only 250 or so left. Once the regions controlled by these 250 minor Heavenly Cycle Star banners disappear, the Vermilion Bird Emperor Star will be completely breached, and the entire Heavenly Cycle Star formation will be finished. After about 5 minutes, Lu Yuanjie finally finished explaining the current situation. To put it simply, the most intense battle was on the Imperial Star. As long as the area controlled by the Imperial Star was destroyed, the entire Ju Tian Star formation would also be destroyed. Then, the 12 Zhu Wus would break free, and the human race would be finished. That means that our current goal is to save the Vermilion Bird Imperial Star. As long as we can protect the Vermilion Bird Imperial Star, the entire Heavenly Cycle Star formation will also be safe. An elderly sword wielder said. That's right, so our next goal is to go to the Imperial Star and help the swordsmen there fight against the Wu people. We'll suppress the arrogant Wu people. Lu Yuanjie nodded. I have a question, Leslie Dracula said. Since we're going to save the Imperial Star, what's the point of us going through 4 different gates? Aren't we going to the same place in the end? Leslie Dracula glanced at Gu Han. Her meaning was simple. She was looking down on Guhan. Guhan, in order to enter the same gate as his cousin, worked with more than 30 swordsmen at the same time. In the end, it was all a waste of time. Even if they entered different gates, they would still end up in the same place. It's not that simple. Guhan looked at Leslie Dracula. If it's really what you think, we can all go to the Vermilion Bird Gate. Why do we have to go through 4 different gates and take different star shuttles? I think one star shuttle can fit more than 100 people at the same time. This little brother sure has a clear mind. This star shuttle was parked quite a distance away from the hall where the battle had taken place. After all, Guhan and the others had been walking for a long time, so Lu Yuanjie didn't know what had happened in the hall. Naturally, he didn't know how Guhan had forced Wei Tian to change her arrangement and let Guhan stay with his cousin. If we just need you to support the Vermilion Bird Imperial Star, then 1 star shuttle would be enough. In fact, our first destination is not the battlefield on the Vermilion Bird Imperial Star, but the Sunstar Formation I. We'll hold the flag planting ceremony there, then head to the battlefield on the Vermilion Bird Imperial Star, Lu Yuanjie explained. Flag planting ceremony? What's that? Is it like when I was in school? Do we have to watch that boring flag rise every morning? Leslie Dracula pouted. Of course not. Our Shanghai Pass isn't that boring. Lu Yuanjie smiled. It seems that some of you don't understand the lifestyle and fighting style of our Shanghai Pass, so I need to tell you more. Our Jutian Star battle formation is made up of 365 large Jutian Star flags and 14800 small Jutian Star flags. Therefore, these 15,000 star flags are the foundation of the Jutian Star battle formation. Each sword bearer controls 1 Jutian Star flag. At least 10,000 Jutian Star flags must be maintained to ensure the existence of the Jutian Star battle formation. At the same time, the entire Jutian Star battle formation is filled with dense star power. Such dense star power can even suppress the sword essence in our bodies, making it impossible for us to use the power of the sword essence. It's fine outside the Jutian Star battle formation, but as we go deeper into the Jutian Star battle formation, it's like the sword bearers have drunk Chu-He soup. They can't even release their sword maidens. If you don't believe me, you can try to release your sword maidens now. I guarantee that you won't be able to release anything. After hearing Lu Yuanjie's words, everyone started to try to release their sword maidens. In the end, they were dumbfounded. Just as Lu Yuanjie said, their sword maidens couldn't be released at all. How can this be? How are we supposed to fight in the Jutian Star battle formation? A sword bearer asked anxiously. That's why we need to hold this flag planting ceremony. Lu Yuanjie smiled strangely. If we, the sword bearers, want to fight in the Jutian Star battle formation, we have to convert the sword essence in our bodies into star power. A few hundred years ago, when that bastard Jade Emperor gave the Jutian Star battle formation to the sword bearers, he also gave them a method to convert the sword essence into star power. That is, insert the Jutian Star battle formation into your purple palace and use the power of the Jutian Star battle formation to convert the sword essence in the sword bearer's body into star power. Then, you can use the star power to drive the sword maidens to fight. This is the origin of the flag planting ceremony. By inserting the Jutian Star battle formation into your purple palace, you can convert the sword essence into star power. Then, you can use the star power to control the sword maidens to fight. However, every Jutian Star battle formation has a fixed number. Only when the owner of the old Jutian Star battle formation leaves or dies can you inherit the new Jutian Star battle formation. At the same time, in order to balance out the strength of the various Emperor Stars, we can't directly make you all belong to the Vermilion Bird Emperor Star's spiritual cycle star banner. You will have to be divided into 4 Emperor Stars that have suffered heavy losses. Among them, the Myrtle Imperial Star and the Supreme Micro Imperial Star suffered the most, so these 2 Emperor Stars have the most famous sword bearers. Because the Myrtle Imperial Star and the Supreme Micro Imperial Star have been breached, the Great Jutian Star battle formation has been moved to the Sun Star, which is the eye of the formation. So, you have to go to the Sun Star and hold the flag planting ceremony with the Great Jutian Star battle formation. After converting the sword essence in your body into star power, you can go to the vermilion bird imperial star to provide support. So that's how it is. After hearing Lu Yuanjie's explanation, everyone let out a long sigh of relief. So, they only needed to hold the flag planting ceremony to recover their battle strength. They thought it would always be like this, where they couldn't even summon their sword maidens. According to what you said, we should be heading to the Sun Star now? Guhan suddenly asked. Of course. I made it very clear. You can only hold the flag planting ceremony if you go to the Sun Star. Lu Yuanjie frowned, as if he was very dissatisfied with Guhan asking a question he already knew the answer to. Then I'm curious. Why do I feel that according to the route shown on this map, we are going to the territory of the Supreme Micro-Imperial Star? Guhan asked as he looked at the GPS real-time panoramic map on the Star Shuttle. This was a three-dimensional map. On it, there was a small dot constantly flying between the mountains. Obviously, this dot represented the Star Shuttle. This map was only used to show the flight status of the Star Shuttle, so there were no specific places marked on the map. There were only various kinds of terrain constantly passing by. What are you talking about? We are clearly going to the Sun Star. Lu Yuanjie's voice suddenly became a little nervous. If I remember correctly, the mountain in front of us on the map should be the Big Black Mountain. On the left of the Big Black Mountain is the Shack Mountain, and on the right is the Lonely Mountain. If we fly forward for another minute, we will reach the original Shenyang City ruins. 10 hours ago, it was the place where the Supreme Micro-Imperial Star was stationed. Now, it has been completely conquered by the Wu people. What? When everyone heard what Guhan said, they immediately stood up in shock. This Lu Yuanjie was using the Star Shuttle to take them to the occupied Shenyang City. What was this Lu Yuanjie thinking? Ha ha ha. The chief told me not to underestimate you humans. I didn't think much of it. I didn't expect there to be a new sword wielder who really remembered the entire northeast region. Ha ha ha. But it's too late. You can all go to hell. Lu Yuanjie suddenly roared. He suddenly turned into a monster with a human face and dog ears. There were 2 green snakes hanging from his ears. Chapter 848. The Wu people were living beings created by the 12 Zhu Wu with their own blood. They shared the same lineage as the 12 Zhu Wu. They inherited the name Zhu Wu and were divided into 12 different tribes. They were the Rushu tribe, Gomong tribe, Gonggong tribe, Zhurong tribe, Hutu tribe, Tianwu tribe, Shenming tribe, Qiangliang tribe, Xuanzi tribe, Dejiang tribe, Kandal-Join tribe, and Shebi tribe. The Wu people of these 12 tribes all looked different. They each had the features of humans and beasts. The human-headed, beast-like monster that Lu Yuanjie had transformed into in front of Guhan and the others was the most eye-catching feature of the Shebi tribe's Wu people. What's going on? Some of the sword-bearers yelled in panic when they saw Lu Yuanjie's shocking transformation. It's obvious that the real Lu Yuanjie is dead. The Lu Yuanjie in front of us is just a corpse possessed by the Shebi tribe's Wu people. Leslie Dracula said with a frown. I remember now. I've read about the 12 Wu people. The Wu people of the Shebi tribe were born with the ability to possess other people's corpses. They could control the movement of other people's corpses. Immediately, some of the sword-wielding bearers reacted and quickly imagined the entire process through their imagination. The real Lu Yuanjie had died at some point, and the Wu people of the Shebi tribe had possessed Lu Yuanjie's corpse and pretended to be Lu Yuanjie to pick them up on the Star Shuttle. If I'm not mistaken, I'm afraid there are many Wu people waiting for us at the Shenyang City ruins, right? Guhan said, looking at the Wu people. Hearing Ji Yuhan's words, all the sword-bearers present couldn't help but shiver. When they thought about the countless Wu people's warriors attacking them after they got off the Star Shuttle, they did not dare to think further. Oh my God! Am I going to die here today? A sword-bearer thought sadly. Oh my God! I can't believe that my first day in Shanhai Pass would be the day of my death. I really can't accept this. More than one person had the same thought. Ha 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 ha. After restoring his real body, Wu people Lu Yuanjie's voice was no longer the standard human Mandarin. Instead, it had a strong sense of dialect, like a foreigner speaking Chinese. You think too much. There aren't many warriors of the Wu people's clan waiting for you. To deal with you, only 2 strong warriors of the Zhu Rong clan are enough. Ha ha ha. This Wu people laughed crazily. Are you telling the truth? There are only 2 Wu people waiting for us down there. Hearing that there were only 2 warriors from the Wu people's tribe waiting for them, these sword-bearers immediately let out a sigh of relief. What kind of joke was this? 2 insignificant warriors of the Wu people's tribe wanted to deal with 20 famed swordsmen? Wasn't this a huge joke? Everyone, don't be fooled. This Wu people must be lying to us. There can't only be 2 Wu people down there. There must be thousands of soldiers waiting for us down there. Immediately, a middle-aged and elderly sword-bearer reminded the others. Pooh! Lu Yuanjie spat at the sword-bearer. Don't be so full of yourself. 2 warriors of the Wu people's tribe are enough to deal with you. Do you still think that you are the powerful sword-bearers outside the Zhu Tian Star battle formation? Don't forget, you are deep inside the Zhu Tian Star battle formation, and none of you have held the flag-planting ceremony. Therefore, you are just ordinary humans. Maybe I won't even have to deal with the 2 warriors of the Zhu Rong clan. I can kill you all by myself. Lu Yuanjie of the witch tribe opened his strange mouth and laughed. Through his mouth, the sword-bearers were surprised to find that there was not only 1 tongue in his throat, but a total of 3 tongues swaying in his mouth. It was a creepy sight. Then, Lu Yuanjie of the sorcerer tribe quickly stretched out his 3 tongues. Like 3 agile pythons, they instantly wrapped around the necks of the 3 sword-bearers. The sword-bearers subconsciously wanted to release their sword ladies. However, when they grabbed the hilts of their sword ladies, they suddenly remembered that their sword elements had been suppressed by the power of the stars in the Zhu Tian Star battle formation. They couldn't release their sword ladies at all. At the same time, Lu Yuanjie's tongue began to shrink, like 3 strands of white silk, trying to strangle the 3 sword-bearers to death. The 3 unlucky sword-bearers instinctively grabbed at the tongue that was wrapped around their necks, trying to pry it loose. But it was destined to be futile. After losing their sword essence, their bodies were at most at the level of an ordinary person. Their opponent was a Wu people. Although they didn't know what level this Wu people was at, even a junior magus, the lowest level among the Wu people, was equal to the tiger-level Yuan Ku. These 3 sword-bearers, who had returned to the level of ordinary humans, couldn't pry them off at all. Everyone, let's save them. The other sword-bearers immediately moved. Although they couldn't release their sword ladies, they could still fight with their swords. In a split second, over 10 sword ladies hacked on Lu Yuanjie's tongue. Although these sword-bearers only had the strength of ordinary humans, the sword ladies themselves could cause a lot of damage to the Wu people. The 3 tongues were immediately slashed with many wounds, and some of them even had small cuts. The pain made Lu Yuanjie's expression contort. Yes. Our attacks are working. Everyone, continue to attack these tongues, the sword-bearers said excitedly. However, after suffering once, how could Lu Yuanjie of the Wu people suffer a second time? So, when these sword-bearers were about to attack again, Lu Yuanjie of the Wu people's Lu Yuanjie's body suddenly released over 10 air blades. These air blades weren't very powerful, and these famous swords-level sword-bearers wouldn't care about them at all. Even if these air blades hit their bodies, they wouldn't even consume 1% of the energy of their personal shields. But these sword-bearers forgot that they no longer had their personal shields. Therefore, the air blades directly slashed the bodies of the sword-bearers, cutting a hole in their clothes and leaving streaks of blood on their bodies at the same time. The injured sword-bearers all wailed in anguish, and the sword maidens in their hands also fell to their knees involuntarily. Ha 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 ha. You useless sword-bearers, without your sword ladies, without your personal shields, you're not even worth a fart. Lu Yuanjie of the witch tribe shouted crazily, but his words deeply hurt the hearts of the sword-bearers. Just as he had said, after losing the power of the sword lady, these sword-bearers who usually held high positions behaved worse than ordinary people. Ordinary humans could still fight with their willpower after being seriously injured, but these sword-bearers couldn't bear the pain of their wounds and could only fall to the ground. I'll send the 3 of you on your way, then I'll deal with the rest. Arth. Lu Yuanjie of the Wu people suddenly cried out in pain. Then, 3 streams of blue liquid shot out like water guns, instantly dyeing the surrounding ground blue. The blue liquid was none other than the blood of Lu Yuanjie of the Wu people. The Wu people were different from humans. The blood of the Wu people was blue. It was just like a very popular novel before the apocalypse, The Blue-Blooded People. Although the novel categorized the blue-blooded people as extraterrestrials, in other words, aliens. However, in reality, the blue-blooded people were a characteristic of the Wu people. Legend had it that after the Wu people perished, they ended up living together with humans of mixed blood. There was a very small chance that humans would revert to their ancestry, and the direct manifestation of this phenomenon was the appearance of blue blood. At that moment, Lu Yuanjie's 3 tongues that were used to restrain the 3 sword-bearers had all been severed. Furthermore, from the remaining length of the tongues and the extremely neat incision, it could be determined that the 3 stones had been severed with 1 strike. There was no need for a second strike. No. Can. As his tongues were gone, Lu Yuanjie of the Wu people could no longer speak normally. All he could do was make thick, nasal sounds. The sword-bearers present had to listen carefully to understand what Lu Yuanjie was trying to say. Trash. Another sword beam flashed, and Lu Yuanjie of the Wu people's head flew up before falling to the ground. His body fell to the ground in a daze, and blue blood gushed out from his severed head, dyeing the entire carriage in a strange blue color. However, what was strange was that although Lu Yuanjie of the Wu people was dead, the dimensional vortex didn't appear. This already defied the common sense of this world. However, the other sword-bearers didn't find this strange. Although they didn't have a detailed understanding of the Wu people in Shanhai Pass, they still knew basic common sense about the Wu people. The sorcerer tribe was immortal. Their power and bloodline came from their ancestor of sorcery. Therefore, even if they were killed, they would return to the body of their ancestor of sorcery through the veins of the earth. After waiting for a period of time, they could be resurrected and once again become the sorcerer tribe that fought against humans. Moreover, the resurrected sorcerer tribe members would inherit the appearance and name of their previous life. Their power and attributes would be exactly the same as the previous generation. It was equivalent to being reborn. Of course, the reborn Wu people couldn't recover their previous memories. This was also one of the reasons why Shanhai Pass needed tens of thousands of swordbearers to guard it for centuries. This was because the Wu people's strength in Shanhai Pass couldn't be depleted at all. There would only be a period of trough. After this period of time, the sorcerer tribe of the 12 tribes would be able to recover their full strength. Therefore, the humans could not relax their guard over the Shanhai Pass. The only thing that could be considered fortunate was that no matter how much they fought and cultivated, these Wu people couldn't improve their abilities. The ability level they had when they were first born would be the same in this life. Even after being reborn, it would still be the same. Otherwise, if these Wu people could continue cultivating after being reborn, Shanhai Pass wouldn't have been able to defend it long ago. Chapter 849. How could you? When Wu people Lu Yuanjie was completely dead, the other sword-bearers, including Leslie Dracula, realized that a valiant young girl was standing in front of them with a long sword that was covered in blue blood. It was obvious that this young girl was the one who killed Wu people Lu Yuanjie. However, these sword-bearers could not understand why their dozens of sword ladies were unable to directly cut off Wu people Lu Yuanjie's tongue, but this young girl was able to cut off 3 of Wu people Lu Yuanjie's tongues in 1 strike. Why? Jiyu Black Tortoise ignored the puzzled gazes of these sword-bearers and turned to look at Guhan beside him. Why is my primal chaos split heaven not even able to achieve 1/10 of your effect? You're thinking too much. Even if I use primal chaos split heaven, it's only at this level. Guhan shook his head and patted Jiyu Black Tortoise's head. My strike just now wasn't simple. In fact, of the 2 strikes I used just now, I realized that the first strike couldn't directly cut off his tongue, so I added the sword element to the second strike to cut it off. Jiyu Black Tortoise's voice appeared in Guhan's ears through secret voice transmission. It was no wonder that Jiyu Black Tortoise would complain to Guhan about why her sword technique couldn't reach 1/10 of Guhan's standard. It turned out that she had secretly used the sword element to achieve the effect. You can use the sword element. Guhan was a little surprised when he heard Jiyu Black Tortoise's words. Because Guhan was still a normal sword bearer, even Guhan could not use the power of the sword element and could not release his sword lady. Now that he heard that Jiyu Black Tortoise could use her sword element, he was naturally a little surprised. However, when Guhan thought about it, the matter did not seem to be inexplicable. This was because Jiyu Xuanwu was not a human at all, but a hybrid between Yuan Ku and a human, so his body naturally had its own special characteristics. Moreover, as the only person in the world who could synchronize with the sword lady and possess the sword essence, the Jiyu Xuanwu must have a very special setting that even Guhan did not know about. Perhaps this setting included the Jiyu Xuanwu being able to use the sword essence in the Ju Tian star formation. I don't know why either, but I feel that the sword essence in my body isn't affected at all. It's the same as usual. Jiyu Xuanwu said through sound transmission, please don't change the topic. Tell me quickly, why is it that even though we are using the same sword technique, my power is not even 1/10 of yours? Judging from your sword technique, although there is a gap between us, the gap is not big. It won't affect me too much. Guhan began to analyze, however, my chaos sword art is not as simple as a simple sword art. Instead, it is a set of sword arts formed by the fusion of many other sword arts and my life's comprehension. Therefore, there is something that can only be understood and cannot be explained in words. You're saying that I lack this thing that can only be understood and cannot be explained? Jiyu Xuanwu's brows furrowed even tighter. What exactly is this thing? Can't you explain it in a simpler way? I'm sorry, I can't do that. Guhan shook his head. I have yet to understand this sword art. Currently, I can only use this move, so it is still a semi-finished product. I have yet to understand the thing inside, so how am I going to teach you? You liar. You're definitely not willing to teach me. Jiyu Xuanwu did not believe Guhan's words from the start, and said with a pout. Then you can just treat me as a liar. Anyway, it doesn't matter to me. Guhan said with a cold face. Jiyu Xuanwu was speechless, although her face was filled with unwillingness. Because the entire conversation was carried out through voice transmission, these sword bearers could only hear the first few sentences of this pair of cousins. After that, Guhan and Jiyu Xuanwu maintained a state of silence. However, the previous few sentences were enough, because it made these sword bearers suddenly remember what had happened in the hall. The battle that Guhan had just fought in the hall was very similar to today's battle. In the same situation where they did not use sword essence, Guhan's sword strike without using sword essence had consumed more than 3% of the sword maiden's personal shield's energy. Their personal shield was a famed sword-grade personal shield, which had at least 20,000 to 30,000 points of personal shield's energy. Guhan's sword strike was equivalent to eliminating around 1,000 points of personal shield's energy. The toughness of this Wu people's Lu Yuanjie's tongue was probably equivalent to a few hundred points of personal shield's energy. Jiyu Xuanwu was Guhan's cousin, so she must have also learned Guhan's sword technique. Therefore, it was not strange for her to be able to cut off the Wu people's Lu Yuanjie's tongue with a single strike. Of course, these sword bearers were also curious about something. They were curious about the sword technique that Jiyu Xuanwu had just mentioned, Primal Chaos Heaven Splitter. Obviously, this was the name of the sword technique that had just been used. These sword bearers could not help but feel a surge of desire towards Primal Chaos Heaven Splitter. If they could also learn this technique, they would undoubtedly have a great ability to protect their lives in the upcoming battle. These sword bearers looked at Guhan with fervent gazes, as if they really wanted to learn the sword technique called Primal Chaos Heaven Splitter from Guhan. However, before these sword bearers could speak, they discovered that the star shuttle had begun to tremble violently. At the same time, through the scenery outside the window, they could see that the star shuttle's position was continuously descending. Clearly, the star shuttle had entered a state of descent. Not good. The star shuttle is about to land. We will soon be surrounded by the Wu people. One of the sword bearers wailed. Then, the atmosphere that had calmed down after killing the Wu people's Lu Yuanjie with much difficulty returned to a tense atmosphere. They were afraid that the moment the door of the star shuttle was opened, countless warriors of the wizard tribe would rush in and tear them into pieces after they lost their sword lady. Go to the pilot's seat. Hurry up and control the star shuttle. Let the star shuttle fly again and fly to the Sun Star Array I. The sword bearers immediately rushed to the pilot's seat, wanting to control the star shuttle again. However, when they saw the pilot's seat with their own eyes, they were all dumbfounded. Because the entire manual control system on the pilot's seat had been violently destroyed, all the buttons and wires on the control lever on the panel had been pulled out. Even if the workers responsible for building the entire star shuttle were here, they would not be able to repair the seriously damaged manual control system in a short period of time. The star shuttle's automatic control system was also suffering. A large hole had been smashed in the computer screen, and the electrical components inside were constantly emitting sparks. Only a small red light on the side of the screen was constantly flashing. Next to this small light was a line of small words that clearly said emergency return. What does this light mean? One of the sword bearers shouted. It's an emergency return indicator light. A sword bearer immediately replied, I've studied the books related to the star shuttle. Once the internal control system of the star shuttle is damaged or malfunctioned, the star shuttle will automatically return to its original control panel according to the mechanism set by the shuttle. This is a star shuttle that belongs to the Supreme Star, so this star shuttle is returning to the Supreme Star's control panel. One of the sword bearers said in panic. Don't you understand? This Wu people is afraid that we will control the star shuttle to return to the Sun Star, so he deliberately destroyed all the equipment and used the automatic return system so that we can only return to the Supreme Star's control panel. That's right. No wonder he kept telling us about the situation of the battle and that stupid flag planting ceremony. At first, I really thought that he wanted us to understand what happened in Shanghai Pass, so I listened very carefully and didn't look around in detail. Now that I think about it, he was trying to attract our attention so that we wouldn't pay attention to the fact that the pilot's seat had been destroyed. Hearing this, Guhan couldn't help but feel a little guilty. This was because even he was attracted by the situation of the battle that Lu Yuanjie had described. He didn't think to pay attention to the situation in the pilot's seat. Otherwise, he wouldn't have discovered the truth through the strange 3D map in the last few minutes. These sorcerer tribesmen are too vicious. This is their meticulous plan. They know that once our reinforcements arrive, they won't be able to continue. So, they set their sights on us reinforcements. They want to kill us easily before we hold the flag planting ceremony. The sword-bearer pieced the whole thing together in a few words, and that was the truth. However, as the whole truth was pieced together, everyone's confidence hit rock bottom. Since this was a meticulous plan by the Wu people, they would definitely die. As soon as the star shuttle landed, it would be the end of everyone. Don't worry. I believe what this Wu people said just now. There might really only be 2 Wu people's warriors outside. In the eyes of these Wu people, we, the sword-bearers, who haven't held the flag planting ceremony, are just ordinary people. A mere junior magus Wu people dared to try and kill us in the spaceship. This means that they look down on us. Even if there are more than 2 Wu people's warriors outside, there won't be that many of them. This is our chance. All of you listen to my command later. I will lead you to kill a path of blood to escape. At the crucial moment, Ji Yuhan stood up and said to everyone present. Because of the chaos split the heavens just now, all the sword-bearers present were still in awe of Guhan. They also knew that if there was really a chance to escape, they had to rely on Guhan's power. Therefore, when Guhan took the initiative to stand up and attempt to take over the management of the entire team, no one, including Leslie Dracula, objected. Thus, Guhan successfully became the temporary leader of the entire team. Chapter 850. To some extent, Lu Yuanjie was indeed a good Wu people who never lied. Because on the control panel of the Star Shuttle, only 2 Wu people warriors were waiting for the Star Shuttle to land. These were 2 warriors from the Zhu Rong tribe. Different from the Shi Bai tribe's shamans who had human heads and beast bodies, The Zhurong tribe's warriors were the complete opposite. They had human bodies and beast faces, and there were 2 fire snakes hovering around their bodies. Judging by these 2 fiery snakes, one could judge the power level of the Wu people of the Zhurong tribe. If this fiery snake was only as long as a human hand, it would be a junior magus, who was equal to the tiger-level Yuan Ku. If this fiery snake was as long as an arm, it would be a middle magus, who was equal to the soul-level Yuan Ku. If this fiery snake had 2 dragon horns, it would be a sky magus, who was equal to the dragon-level Yuan Ku. If this fiery snake had 2 dragon claws and 2 dragon horns, it would be a Pholus-level senior magus, who was equal to the Pholus-level Yuan Ku. The same was true for the Shi by Corpse clan. The 2 green snakes on their ears would have different shapes, and with different shapes, one could see the different levels and powers of these Wu people. Senior Magi were the limit of the Wu people, because after all, senior Magi were creatures created by Zhu Wu. Therefore, they were born with their own limits. Unless they could absorb all of Zhu Wu's Pan-Jiu spirit blood, they wouldn't be able to become Zhu Wu. But in this case, the previous Zhu Wu would die for sure, and this wouldn't make too much of a difference. The fiery snakes hovering around the 2 Zhurong tribe warriors were as long as a human arm, which meant that these 2 Wu people were middle Magi of the Zhurong tribe, who were equal to the sword wielders of human beings, and the soul-level Yuan Ku. This kind of power was more than enough to deal with 20 ordinary people who had lost their sword essence powers. Therefore, these 2 Zhurong tribe warriors seemed to be quite careless, as if they could do anything easily. Finally, the star shuttle appeared before them, and it successfully landed on the boarding platform. The 2 warriors of the Zhurong clan immediately rushed up to the star shuttle and stood on the left and right sides of the gate. Once the gate opened, they would rush into the star shuttle and kill all human beings inside. Crash! The door of the star shuttle opened upwards. The 2 warriors of the Zhurong clan immediately rushed into the star shuttle like fierce tigers. After that, a series of chaotic noises came from inside the star shuttle. In the end, 2 huge heads flew out of the shuttle, and the corpses of the 2 Zhurong clan warriors were thrown out as well. Inside the star shuttle, Guhan took out a piece of tissue and wiped all the bloodstains off Qingpin's sword. Without the sword essence, it was indeed a troublesome matter. Previously, as long as the sword qi vibrated, Qingpin's sword would not be stained with any blood. But now, without the sword essence, even those bloody bloodstains would be stained on Qingpin's sword. Therefore, Guhan had to clean those bloodstains with his own hands. The other warriors looked at Guhan in awe, because just now, Guhan had killed the 2 warriors of the Zhurong clan all by himself. Like a graceful dancer, he even had the time to change his sword maidens during the fight. At last, he killed the 2 warriors of the Zhurong clan without being harmed at all. This is actually a bit tricky. After Jiyu Han killed the 2 sorcerer tribe members, he also began to silently evaluate the battle just now. Without the sword essence, Guhan's fighting capacity had dropped greatly. According to Guhan's estimation, he was only as powerful as a flood dragon level warrior, Yuan Ku. Without the strengthening of the sword essence, the damage he could cause with only a sword maiden was way too low. Especially when he was facing the intermediate Magi warriors of the Wu people, who had decent defensive abilities. Before, every single one of his attacks would have killed them, but now, he couldn't even break through their defenses. He could only rely on continuously attacking the same spot to destroy their defenses and kill them by slowly grinding them down. Therefore, when Guhan fought against the 2 Wu people, he had already used around half of his power, and these were only 2 intermediate Magi. According to Guhan's estimation, if there were 3 more opponents like this, Guhan would still be able to defeat them with his full strength. If there were 10 more, Guhan might be able to maintain his undefeatable state, but if there were 11 more, then, Guhan would have no choice but to run. I didn't expect the Qingpin sword to be useful at such a crucial moment. Guhan looked at the Qingpin sword in his hand and mumbled to himself. In the beginning, Guhan had been fighting with the Juzi sword out of habit. However, the Juzi sword itself was made from Fusang wood. With the addition of the sword essence, it could increase the damage of the path of diabolism. However, when it lost the sword essence, although Fusang wood was the greatest divine wood in the world, it was still a piece of wood, and wood was born with the characteristic of not being sharp enough. Otherwise, Guhan wouldn't have used a wooden sword to train his swordsmanship when he was young. This was because wooden swords couldn't hurt him. Therefore, when he first used the juicy sword to fight against the two Wu people, Guhan felt very weak. The blade of the sword couldn't cause much damage when it slashed at their bodies. He had to swing the sword with all his might to draw blood. Therefore, after fighting a few rounds with the juicy sword, Guhan decisively put the juicy sword back into its scabbard and switched to the heavenly sword to fight. Guhan originally wanted to switch to the Chijian sword because the Chijian sword's basic material was the strongest. It was made of emperor alloy, so it should be the sharpest sword among Guhan's sword ladies. Furthermore, due to the existence of dimensional nodes, as long as Guhan was willing, he could attack the other party's dimensional nodes and create a dimensional vortex to send these Wu people back even without any sword essence. However, it seemed like these Wu people wouldn't produce a dimensional vortex after they died. From the looks of it, the special effects of the Chijian sword wouldn't work on the Wu people. However, the problem was that the Chijian sword and the juicy sword looked identical. The only difference was that the colors were black and white. As the entire battle was being watched by the other practitioners, they would definitely be curious as to why Guhan had two sword ladies that looked identical but had different colors. Therefore, unless it was an emergency, Guhan didn't wish to use the Chijian sword to avoid unnecessary trouble. Therefore, the heavenly sword became the best choice. In terms of sharpness, the heavenly sword naturally far exceeded the juicy sword. Guhan didn't need to use any strength to leave a bloody mark on his opponent's body. This way, Guhan's battle was much easier than before. Most of the damage suffered by the two Wu people was caused by the heavenly sword. However, when Guhan wanted to kill the two Wu people with the heavenly sword, Guhan suddenly heard Qingpin's voice. Qingpin seemed to be using her usual soft voice to urge Guhan to kill the two Wu people. Although Guhan didn't know why he heard Qingpin's voice, it didn't stop him from testing according to the voice. Therefore, Guhan switched the heavenly sword to Qingpin's sword. The blade of the sword lightly swung and cut the two Wu people's severely injured necks, sending them to their deaths. When the two heads flew into the air, Guhan seemed to feel something seeping into the blade of Qingpin's sword. What should we do now? Seeing the two Zhu Rong warriors, who had ambushed them, die, the other sword-bearers on the scene let out a long sigh and couldn't help but ask one question. What should they do now? What else can we do? Of course, we have to find a way to get to the sun. Leslie Dracula pouted. Are we supposed to wait for death here? We don't have to wait for death here. Another older swordsman stroked his beard and said, I looked around just now and realized that there are no other witch tribesmen around this landing stage. This place is surprisingly deserted. Therefore, I believe that most of the Wu people have gathered at the front line of the Vermilion Bird Imperial Star and are fighting with the practitioners there. If we leave this place now and head to the Sun Star, we'll have to go through the place where the Shaman tribe has the most people among the 5 tribes, and we'll have to go through the back of the Shaman tribe. I don't even need to think to know that normal people like us who have lost our sword essences will definitely be chopped into minced meat by those crazy shamans in an instant. We'll just be going to our deaths if we head to the Sun Star now. Therefore, I suggest that we stay near the landing platform. When our practitioners win, they will naturally come and take back the area suppressed by the Supreme Star. We will be safe when we meet up with those practitioners. The swordsman's words resonated with the others. It did sound like the safest plan. What if we practitioners can't win in the end? Leslie Dracula suddenly asked. How can we not win? Our Miss Ling should have reached the sun by now. With Miss Ling and her invincible billion sword technique, how can we humans lose? Victory will belong to us humans, the practitioner said proudly. He was clearly very confident in Liuonian Ling. Leslie Dracula pulled at her hair helplessly. Although I agree with you, as long as Miss Ling reaches the sun, victory will belong to us humans. The problem is, what if Miss Ling can't reach the sun like us? Silence, a deathly silence, little girl. You can eat whatever you want, but you can't say whatever you want. What did you mean by that? The elderly practitioner asked with a trembling body. Chapter 851. Do you think that the Wu people would only target our team? Leslie Dracula asked with a bitter smile. I might not know about the others, but Ling's team suffered the same fate as ours. However, Lin Ling's team suffered the same fate as us, or perhaps even worse than us. That's impossible. How could you possibly know about this? The sword-bearer was so frightened that he took a step back. Then, he shouted angrily, Don't think that I'm a fool. Don't try to lie to me. I know about the Great Star Formation. The human quantum network can only be used in areas that have been successfully suppressed by the Great Ju Tian Star's star banner. It's impossible to use personal terminals to communicate in areas that have been breached. How could you possibly know about Miss Ling's situation? Of course I know. Leslie Dracula raised her wrist and revealed the personal terminal on her hand. She said with a gloomy expression, My and Ling's personal terminals are different from yours. Besides using the quantum network, our personal terminals can also rely on a special method to communicate. During a certain period of time just now, Linrin and I had regained communication. Ling warned me that the ancient sword-bearer in charge of receiving us might be the Wu people in disguise. Because they fought with the Wu people inside the Star Shuttle and destroyed the entire Star Shuttle, their Star Shuttle is about to crash. They won't be able to return to the Sun Star. What kind of special function is this? You rich people are really special. Even your personal terminals are different from us lowly commoners, the sword-bearer said sourly. The sword-wielder said sourly. At this critical moment, he still had the time to be jealous of his gadget. This is not a special function. It's just a traditional radio wave. Guhan walked in front of the sword-bearer and said calmly, This is the science and technology before the apocalypse. There's not much technical difficulty. If you're willing, I can install this on your personal terminal now. That won't be necessary. Looking at Guhan's calm eyes and recalling his sharp sword skills, the sword-bearer could not help but feel his heart shrink. He obediently retreated. Miss Leslie Dracula, can you still contact Ling? Guhan turned to Leslie Dracula and asked. I can't contact her now. Leslie Dracula shook her head. Lin and I only had a short communication for less than 30 seconds. After that, the communication was forcibly cut off, and I never got in touch with Lin again. When did this happen? Guhan asked again. About 5 minutes ago, when you were fighting with the shaman tribe of the Shebi Corpse tribe, Leslie Dracula replied readily. I get it. The strength of communication between radios is determined by the distance between the two parties. The reason you were able to communicate with Linning for 30 seconds is because we should have been very close to Linning during those 30 seconds. However, because our star shuttle was moving at a high speed, we were out of the range of Ling after 30 seconds. That's why you lost contact with Ling. Am I right? I think, that's what happened. Leslie Dracula lowered her head and said softly, You mentioned earlier that Lin Ling's star shuttle had already been damaged and was in the process of crashing. Therefore, they should have lost the ability to move within a large range. It's like they're fixed in a certain position. Guhan suddenly walked up to the driver's seat of the star shuttle and slashed at a spot in front of the driver's seat. A hidden compartment popped out, and Guhan took out a map from it. Looks like the driver of this star shuttle must have maintained the star shuttle strictly according to the rules. Otherwise, the map wouldn't be in such good condition. Guhan opened up the map and drew a small circle on it. This is our current location, the Shenyang City ruins. Guhan drew a straight line not far away from Shenyang City. This line is the position we've been traveling through in the past 30 seconds. According to the data I know, the distance between two personal terminals through wireless communication is about 100 kilometers. Therefore, we'll draw a circle with a diameter of nearly 100 kilometers at the starting point of this line, and then draw a circle with a diameter of 100 kilometers at the ending point. This way, Miss Ling must have fallen at the place where these two circles overlap, which is this place. Gu Han pointed at a spot on the map. Everybody immediately craned their necks to look. They saw the words Imperial Preceptor written on the spot where the two circles overlapped. Next to these two words, I used a small, dim font to mark the words Taiyan County. That's right. This is the area where the Imperial Preceptor Star is in charge of suppressing, which used to be Taiyan District. I suspect that Ling has fallen in Taiyan District. Guhan said loudly. Clap 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 clap. Everyone applauded loudly for the young man, Guhan. They didn't expect that this young man was not only powerful, but also terrifyingly intelligent. He was able to calculate the location of Ling's fall with only a short time of communication. This was something that none of them could do. What should we do now? Someone immediately asked Guhan. Obviously, he wanted to listen to Guhan's opinion. However, they seemed to have forgotten that when the Star Shuttle landed, they had already acquiesced to Guhan's leadership. However, after Guhan had defeated the 2 Wu people of the Zhurong tribe, they had forgotten about Guhan. Until now, they once again wanted to listen to Guhan's opinion. My opinion is very simple. We can't stay in the Shenyang city ruins forever. After the 2 Wu people of the Zhurong tribe died, their bodies will return to their tribes through the earth veins. The shamans of the tribes will immediately discover that the Wu people who were sent to kill us have already died by our hands. Therefore, I believe that before long, they will arrange for more sorcerer warriors to come and kill us. Therefore, if we continue to stay here, we will definitely die. Everyone couldn't help but nod when they heard Guhan's words. They had to admit that Guhan's words were very reasonable. Staying here was indeed a dead end. Of course, just like what that senior was worried about, if we directly charge towards the sun, we will also die. So, the only thing we can do now is to increase our strength as quickly as possible and meet up with Ling and the others who have fallen in Taiyan District. The Liu Nian family is the most powerful family in the world. They might have a way to recover our strength. Even if they don't have such a way, it will be safer with more people. So, my suggestion is very simple. We will immediately head to Taiyan District and find a way to find Ling's team. Then, we will meet up with Ling and think about the next step. Guhan gave his suggestion. Agreed. That's right, this is indeed the best idea. I have no objections. After all, these people trusted the Liu Nian family more. So, when they heard that Guhan wanted to meet up with Liunian Ling first, they immediately agreed. Alright, since everyone agrees with my plan, then listen to my commands. Pack your things first, then leave the Star Shuttle together and head to Taiyan District. Unexpectedly, just as Guhan finished speaking, another disharmonious voice sounded out. Although your plan is not bad, why should we old guys listen to the commands of a junior? A middle-aged swordsman said unhappily. The amount of salt we've eaten together is more than the amount of rice you've eaten. Our experience and knowledge naturally far surpass yours. Furthermore, you juniors are careless and have no patience at all. You also don't pay attention to some details. On the other hand, us old fellows are naturally more comprehensive and thorough in our considerations. We also have more combat experience, so I think it's better to leave the commanding authority to us old fellows. You 2 juniors just need to listen to our commands and fight. This middle-aged swordsman wanted to seize the command by saying that they lacked experience and wanted Guhan to listen to their commands. What a joke! Guhan laughed coldly as if he had heard the funniest joke in the world. What do you mean by eating more salt than rice? The amount of rice in a meal is thousands of times more salt. Are you all also thousands of times older than me? Are you all going to eat 3 taels of salt in a meal? Fine, I will give each of you 3 taels of salt later. If anyone can eat 3 taels of salt in a meal, I will listen to his command. Immediately, all the old guys were speechless. Who the hell could eat 3 taels of salt in a meal? If they really ate it, they would probably be dehydrated. Listening to Guhan's words, young people like Leslie Dracula felt very satisfied. Because almost all young people were taught by the old with words like I've eaten more salt than you've eaten rice, or I've walked more bridges than you've walked on road. Generally speaking, young people couldn't refute it. Until now, when they heard Guhan's sharp rebuttal, they felt so comfortable that it was as if they had been slaughtered. Also, who is going to command me? Who is going to come out and fight? Could it be that there are 18 mouths that can order me and my cousin around? Ji Yu Han's sharp mockery caused the entire Star Shuttle to become even quieter. Forget it, I can't be bothered to care about your lives. If you are willing to listen to my command, then follow me now. If you don't want to listen to me, then go do whatever you want. You walk your open road, I walk my single log bridge. I want to see if the salt you've eaten can make you live a little longer. With that, Guhan directly left the star shuttle with Jiyu Xuanwu. Wait for me. I will resolutely listen to Comrade Guhan's command. Leslie Dracula immediately followed behind Guhan and left together with him. The remaining 17 middle-aged and old swordsmen looked at each other in dismay, and then uniformly rushed out like a swarm of bees. Although their face was completely ruined by this junior, compared to their own lives, face was not important. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.